Welcome. My name is Richard Aronson, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing my friend and former colleague, Justice Thomas Goethals. This interview is part of the California Courts Legacy Project, which is designed to preserve the judicial history of California's judges who shape and develop California's law. I had the honor of serving with Justice Goethals on the Court of Appeal in the 4th District, Division 3, which is located in Orange County. Tom's distinguished career is marked by numerous achievements, honors, and contributions to the law and the legal community. Before we discuss this, however, Tom, I want to start at the beginning. So tell us, where were you born, and describe your family background?
I thought that might be where we would start. I would just say before I directly answer that question that as a justice, I didn't really have a philosophy of writing opinions except to say this. I tried to start at the beginning, say what the case was about, say how we were going to resolve it, and then explain why. So I thought I would adopt that same approach to this interview. This is a legacy interview, so it's going to be about my life, I guess. Why anyone is interested in that, I don't know, but it will come up that I interviewed you when you retired, so we were all interested in that. So anyway, it's going to be about that. How it came out is I have been incredibly blessed in my life with my family and my friends. So that's how we resolve it. Most of my great fortune has been as a result of that. But the why to that I cannot answer. Why have I been so fortunate in my life? God only knows. I was born on April 28th, 1952 in Glendale, California, in what was then called the Physicians and Surgeons Hospital down in South Central Glendale. It's now called Glendale Memorial Hospital as part of a big chain. I was the second oldest of 8 children that were born to my parents, Richard and Mary Goethals, who were married in 1947, August 23rd, 1947. My older brother, I made a note to myself, I want to mention all of my siblings because I am still very close to all of them. And they have been a great part of my life. My older brother, Rick, was born in 1950. Then I came along in 1952. Then my brother, Greg, my sisters, Betsy, Margie, and Katie, my brother, Art, and my baby sister, Chrissy, whose real name is Florence after my maternal grandmother. We were raised in Glendale, which was a different community then than it is now, right? Kind of between the San Gabriel and San Fernando Valley. We really had a great childhood. It was a kind of an Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver type of childhood. As the second oldest of 8, my mom was busy raising all my little brothers and sisters, and so we had tremendous freedom as kids. And in those days, we wandered around town, we being my older brother and I primarily. We'd get up in the morning, especially in the summer. We'd get on our bikes. We had friends all over town. There was a park not too far away that had a big baseball field and a big football field. And honestly, I don't think my mom had any idea where we were most of the time. But if she wondered, she'd call around to the network of families that we hung out with. And eventually, I guess she'd figure out where we were. But she knew most of the time she could find us at the park. My older brother Rick and I were avid sports fans. He was the athlete and the brain. I mean, he really was an amazing human being. He was a natural athlete. He could play any sport. We were both baseball players. We both wanted to play for the Dodgers, and he was a pitcher and I was a catcher. And so we were a brother battery growing up. My dad used to always say that, like Norm Sherry and Larry Sherry of the Dodgers.
Right.
And so we played Little League and Babe Ruth League, and we played a lot of baseball.
So he was 2 years ahead of you. Did he go to Loyola High with you?
He did. He was the class of 1968 from Loyola High School, which we will get to. I was the class of 1970. My next brother, Greg, was the class of 1973. My youngest brother, Art, who is 10 or 15 years younger than me. I'm not exactly sure when he graduated, but we all went there. My dad went to Loyola High and graduated in 1941. But anyway, going back to the beginning, we just wandered around and had just really an idyllic life. My dad was a lawyer, a busy lawyer. He graduated from USC Law School around 1950 or 51, and he joined the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office right after graduation. I have a picture of that group somewhere up in my chambers here, an old picture that's fallen apart, and I think he was either the 11th or 12th Deputy Public Defender in Los Angeles County, which today has, I'm sure, 1,000 public defenders at least. But he joined that office before Gideon versus Wainwright was issued by the United States Supreme Court that said anybody charged with a misdemeanor or a felony had a right to counsel. So when he joined the office, misdemeanor people didn't have lawyers. So when you joined the office, you were thrown right into the deep end, and he was representing people charged with robbery, rape, murder, those kinds of things as a brand new lawyer. I mean, literally, there were 8 or 10 or 12 deputy public defenders for the whole county.
So his career as a lawyer must have had some influence on you.
It did. My older brother, and I should say, my siblings are all great. My older brother was a very successful lawyer. He went to Santa Clara University, as I did, and he went to Santa Clara Law School right out of college. So he became a lawyer in 1975. He kind of fell into a job in San Francisco. He married a gal that he met at Santa Clara from Northern California, well-established family in Northern California, and he never came back to Southern California, which kind of broke my mom and dad's heart a little bit because he was really the star of the family. And so he met and married this gal and ended up being married to her his entire life, had 5 kids. In 1992, I remember getting a call, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. And he had just come back from Stanford University Hospital, and it was just a stunning phone call to get from him. My brother he never smoked, he didn't drink a lot, he'd have a beer occasionally or a glass of wine. He took great care of himself. He was a great athlete, great husband, father, lawyer, person. And just out of the blue, he got liver cancer, and they never were exactly able to figure out where that came from. We were out in the sun a lot as kids, but they didn't think that it was a melanoma-related cancer. Yeah. So anyway, he ended up, and when he was diagnosed, as I say, he had 5 kids. His oldest was 16, his youngest was 3. He'd been married about 20 years. He was the president of a very successful personal injury firm in San Francisco, which then was called Walkup, Downing, and something. Bruce Walkup was a really well-known, successful plaintiff's personal injury lawyer in the city. And Rick was very well thought of, and he was the president of the firm as a young guy. He was only 41 or 42 years old, and Bruce Walkup was probably 65 or 70, but he was running the firm, making a fortune, living a good life as a good human being. Anyway, 18 months later, he died of cancer, which had a tremendous influence on me. He was one of my best friends, and I still think about him. He's been gone now for over 30 years. We just saw his wife and kids at one of our niece's weddings a couple weeks ago, and they've been chugging along. But anyway, so Rick was always going to be a lawyer. He was really the golden boy in our family. And my parents were great parents. They loved us all. But there's something about your oldest son, I guess. And when he got sick, it really influenced our whole family. My mom ended up, who also took great care of herself. Now, she did smoke occasionally and drink a little bit, but she was very healthy. She was a natural athlete, which is probably where Rick got it. She played tennis and golf her whole life and was just a natural athlete and walked and exercised and really took care of herself. And not long after Rick died, she was diagnosed with chronic leukemia, which shocked us all, but it was chronic, so it wasn't going to be too serious. And she lived with that and treated for a year or a year and a half. And then one day she called me and said, "Tom, The doctor has changed my diagnosis. I'm not chronic anymore, I'm acute. And acute leukemia back in the 90s at least was going to get you, and it got her within about 6 months. And I'm convinced to this day that her heart was broken when her oldest son died.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Stress.
the stress and the strain, and my mom, we'll get to this too maybe, but as long as we're talking about it, my mom, I was born and raised a Catholic, as was my entire family. We were cradle Catholics, baptized as infants, went to Catholic grammar school, high school, college, ended up Catholic law school. And our faith meant a lot to us growing up. I'm still a man of faith, I would consider myself, although my perspective's a little different. Anyway, my mom was a very devout Catholic, but she was a convert. She had not been raised a Catholic. And for those people who have ever known a convert to Catholicism, they are the real believers. And so my mom was a real woman of faith. And when my brother was diagnosed with cancer, I'll never forget, somehow she got her hands on some holy water from Lourdes. And Lourdes is a place in southern France where Catholics believe miracles happen because a woman had a vision of the Virgin Mary and dug a spring, and there's this holy water there. And to this day, there's a huge basilica there, and people go there in hopes that they're going to be cured of their disease. And my mom somehow got her hands on a vial of holy water from Lourdes, and my parents were, in their 70s, and my dad wasn't physically real active at that point, but my mom still was. Anyway, they wanted to go up and see Rick. They wanted him to come down here, but he wouldn't for whatever reason. He was treating at Stanford and whatnot, so it just wasn't practical. So I eventually said, okay, I'll go with you. I'll take you to help my dad get up there. So we flew up, and they lived in a beautiful home in San Mateo Woods, and because he was doing very well. And we went, and he was sick when we got there. And he was upstairs in bed, and I went up and had a nice visit with him, and my dad went up and had a nice visit with him. And then finally my mom went and said, I want to go up and talk to Rick alone. And she went up, and she sprinkled the holy water on him. And I think, honestly, my mom, as a woman of such great faith, thought this was going to create a miraculous cure, and obviously it didn't. And that whole series of events kind of broke her heart. But I started that. You're going to see that I'm kind of, once you launch me, I can tell a lot of stories. But anyway, Rick was the natural lawyer, and he always wanted to be a lawyer. My dad left the public defender's office after a dozen years and went out into private practice. And for the last 30 or 40 years of his career, he was a pretty well-established civil defense lawyer, insurance defense lawyer. He was president in the early 80s of the Association of Southern California Defense Counsel, which is still a big deal up there. And he was a very active, and well thought of civil lawyer. So he was the managing partner of a mid-sized law firm in downtown LA. And Rick, I think starting in high school and then certainly all the way through college, every summer he went and worked for my dad because it was kind of an assumption that he would go to law school and maybe work for my dad's firm, or if not, still be an active civil lawyer. And so he did that, and I never did that. I thought, oh my gosh, being a lawyer, what the heck is that all about? It never really was on my radar that I was going to be a lawyer, because maybe it was a reaction to Rick, who I loved and sort of idolized in many ways. But
still you were following, it seems as if you were following in his footsteps. You went to Santa Clara, as he did.
True. And we weren't rivals, really. I mean, he was so much better at everything than I was, but we always competed in a non-threatening way, and we played on the same teams and did a lot of the same things. But I don't know to this day exactly what I was thinking, but I wasn't thinking about going to law school. I really was not. When Rick was going to work for my dad in the summer, I did a lot of other things. I painted houses. A friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, for a summer or two, we had our own painting business. His name was Mike Morgan. My last name is Goethals. We had the Morgo Painting Company. He had an old pickup truck, and we would drive around the valley and paint people's houses, which was great because it was we didn't have a boss or anything. And why people hired us, I have no idea. But we painted probably 5 or 10 houses over the course of a couple summers. Then one summer I worked at Disneyland. I drove the submarines. I still remember the spiel. We are now entering the lost continent of Atlantis, destroyed centuries ago by the eruption of a giant volcano. That was part of the spiel 50 years ago. Several summers I worked for the city of Newport Beach. One summer, my job was to drive along the beach. I was a building maintenance man. So me and 2 other guys drove a van around the city of Newport Beach all day, and we cleaned the public restrooms on the beach. I loved that job too, not the actual physical part of the job, but we had a lot of freedom. And then as a result of that, the next 2 summers I worked for the city of Newport Beach, and I was a field maintenance worker. That meant that I walked along the beach all day with a bag and a stick and collected trash. And I could walk and talk to girls all along the beach, which is exactly what I did. I didn't collect that much trash. And all the girls thought, they were fascinated. And I got to wear like swimming trunks and a hat. And, I'd put my bag down and swim for a while. And they all thought we were inmates. And so they'd all ask, what did you do to have to do this? And I'd say, we're not inmates. We're college students who were collecting trash.
So this is over the summer while you're in college?
Yes. I did that after my first summer in law school. Rather than try to get a legal job, I went back to the city and collected trash because it was such a great job. That's the greatest job I ever had.
Okay, so you went to Loyola High School, and then so I want to back up a little bit. You've maintained contact with Loyola High School. Tell me about your relationship with Loyola.
I have. I would say, I was thinking about this a little bit, reflecting in preparation for this conversation, thinking you might ask me about some of the pivotal moments in my life. And I would say one of the first pivotal moments in my life was the decision that my parents made. I had nothing to do with it, was to go to Loyola High School. I lived, as I said, we lived in Glendale, and we lived on Virginia Avenue, 1436 Virginia Avenue. My parents lived in that house for 50 years, and it was a half a block above Herbert Hoover High School, where a lot of my friends went to high school, and they were very mediocre in sports. But I was kind of a mediocre athlete, but I was very willing. And I was a pretty good team player at a variety of sports, but I was never going to be a star. At Hoover, I could have been somebody. I really thought I had a future as a big-time athlete, and Rick would have really been a big-time athlete.
And this is football, right? That's what.
Well, I really wanted to play football, but I had played baseball my whole life, but I really thought football was where my greatness was going to lie. Now look at me. I was never going to be a star football player. But anyway, my dad had gone to Loyola High. Why, I don't know. He was born and raised in his formative years in Riverside, California. Backing up, don't let me forget that question, but just as a background, my great-grandfather came from Holland in 1888. The day after he and my great-grandmother married in Holland, they got on a ship in Rotterdam Harbor, and they, with a bunch of other Dutch immigrants, they headed off to the New World. My great-grandfather had been here once before. He had scouted it out, and he thought he was going to the Seattle area. And he was going to be a farmer. And for some reason, he thought Seattle was the place to go. But on the ship, there were a bunch of other Dutch people and sort of an organizer, and he convinced them that he was going to take in all these people to Southern California, wherever that was. I'm not sure he even knew where that was. And they were going to all get land and start farming. And so the organizer convinced him, Peter Bernard Goethals, and my great-grandmother, Amelia Marie Goethals, to come with them to take a look at Riverside. And so they said, what the heck? They didn't have any real ties anywhere. And so they ended up going to Riverside, and they found some property there that they thought looked pretty good. And so they bought 10 or 20 acres. I forget what it originally was. It eventually grew to 200 acres. And they spent the rest of their lives there. My grandfather was a farmer, but every picture I've ever seen, my great-grandfather, Peter Bernard, every picture I've ever seen of him, he looks like a businessman or a lawyer or something. He's got a three-piece suit on, so he didn't look like any farmer I had ever seen. And it turned out he did a lot of other things in Riverside. He did become a banker and a variety of things. And as I say, but he always ranched and farmed. He grew the first watermelon out in that part in the Inland Empire, and that became a big deal. He made a lot of money growing watermelon on the Goethals farm. And if you ever are driving eastbound on the 91 freeway, which maybe some of you will someday, and you get to Tyler Street, which is an off-ramp, and you look to the left, there's a huge mall there. It's called the Galleria at Tyler. That property was the Goethals Ranch as I was growing up. And I remember going from Glendale to Riverside in those days was a long way to go. There weren't any freeways, but occasionally we would go out there. And I never met my great-grandfather. He had passed away before I was born, but I met my great-grandmother a few times, and we went to her funeral out there. I remember when I was a little kid, 2 or 3 years old, she was laid out in the farmhouse there, and I thought she was dead, but my aunt, my dad's sister, swears she wasn't dead. We were there kind of for a vigil, but she was lying there in a black suit on a cot in the living room with candles around her. One of my first memories, a little eerie. And her daughters, a couple of her daughters, my great aunts, lived on that property until the 1970s, and they sold it to the developer, and it became the Tyler Mall, and now it's the Galleria at Tyler. Anyway.
Loyola High School.
Okay. So my grandfather was born on that property. My grandfather did not ever have a college education, but he was an accountant. He was a bookkeeper. And he went to work for a company called the Riverside Cement Company right out of high school, and he worked out there locally. And then the Riverside Cement Company was bought by the American Cement Company, which was a huge company whose headquarters were in downtown Los Angeles. And in the late 20s or early 30s, he got transferred to the corporate headquarters. He eventually retired 40 years later as an executive vice president of American Cement, but he was the accounting guy. And when he and so they had to move from Riverside, where they lived, and they moved to Glendale for some reason. I have no idea why. And then my grandfather ended up taking some classes at UCLA in accounting and whatnot, but he didn't graduate. And they lived there. For some reason, they lived in Glendale, which was quite a distance from downtown LA, which is where Loyola High is. But they decided when it was time that my dad was going to go not to a local high school, Glendale High School, I guess. He was going to go to Loyola. And so he did. He drove over from Glendale in the late 30s and the early 40s, because he graduated in 1941. He went to Loyola High. When it was time for us to go to high school, I don't remember any conversation about Rick. He was going to Loyola High, so I remember he took the exam, he got in, he started there. There really wasn't any conversation. I wanted to go to Hoover High School because, again, I thought my athletic future was going to be much better at Hoover High School, but I didn't have any choice, so I ended up taking the entrance exam. I got in, and it was good news and bad news, because Loyola High then was really good in football. They won the CIF Big School Championship 3 years in a row in the mid-'60s. Just before I got there, they had 3 CIF Big School Players of the Year in a row in those years. They set the Big School winning streak of 33 games in a row during that period of time just before I got there. So they were really good. So that was the good news. The bad news was I thought, whoa, they're going to have some players there. But I didn't have any choice, so I went. And that was a pivotal moment for me. Because Loyola High is the oldest high school in Southern California. It's now 170 years old, the oldest continuously operating high school in Southern California. It's the second oldest in the state. St. Ignatius High School in San Francisco, another Jesuit high school, is the oldest. Then the Jesuits came and founded another high school in LA, that was Loyola. And it really changed my outlook on life. It was an all-boys high school, I think I said that. And I wasn't too thrilled about that either when my parents decided that's where I was going to go. But the next event that happened in conjunction with me being at Loyola, those two events really changed my life because I went out for football. I made the freshman team. I was the starting blocking back on the team. So I was going to play, it looked like. And I ended up, the other guys who were on that team, who were in the backfield with me, the tailback became an all-CIF tailback. I still see him occasionally. We're all old and falling apart now, but the fullback became a big-time player, was a scholarship baseball player in college, got signed professionally.
But you got hurt.
And so I was playing, I was going to be somebody. I wasn't going to be a star, but I was going to play. And then my freshman year, I got hurt. And I hurt my knee pretty badly. And so I played at the beginning, and then I missed the rest of the season. And I was in a cast, and this was the old days. I tore my ACL. And in the mid-'60s, I remember going to the hospital the first time, same hospital I was born in. I went down to Glendale Memorial Hospital the next morning, met the orthopedic surgeon, and he looked at me and said, you can't play anymore this year. And he put a cast on. They didn't do anything. They just put a cast on my leg for 3 months. And so that kind of broke my heart. But I was still going to play, so I went out again the next year, and Loyola ran an unusual formation called the single wing. I won't bore you with the details, but it was a direct snap to the tailback. You didn't have a quarterback. The blocking back kind of was the quarterback because he called the signals, but he never touched the ball. He stood behind the guard to the right of the center, so he looked like kind of a T formation quarterback, but he never got the ball. That was me. So I called the signals, but we only had one play in the whole playbook where I ran the ball, and that play was never called. Well, one day we called that play, I ran the ball, and I got tackled and blew my knee out. But I went out the next year, and so we were thinking maybe I shouldn't be the blocking back anymore, so I was playing linebacker, outside linebacker, and the play was over, and some guy rolled up on me after I sort of let down, and anyway, I hurt my knee again.
Same knee?
Same knee. Again, they didn't do any surgery, they just put a cast on my leg, and that really, last part of that story is, my dad was a lawyer of some influence, and so I was 16 or 17 years old, and he knew I really wanted to still play football, and the local orthopedic surgeons were saying, you can't play football anymore, your knee is a mess. And I wasn't buying that. So somehow he got me to see a doctor whose name was Bob Curlin. And it's now known as the Curlin Job Clinic. His office was out somewhere by LAX, and he was the team doctor for the Rams and the Lakers and maybe the Dodgers, but everybody knew who Bob Curlin was. And so I'll never forget, I'm 16 or 17 years old, my dad drives me out there for the appointment, he examines my knee, looks at the x-rays, and he was already kind of past his surgical days. He was a little bent over, and he says to me, son, what are you planning to do for a living? This is Bob Curlin saying this to me. And he was like a medical god in those days. And I said, well, I don't know really. I haven't really thought about it. And he said, well, I can only give you one piece of advice. He said, you need to think about getting a job where you can sit down a lot because your knee is a mess and you can't play football anymore. And I looked at him and he kind of smiled at my dad. And honestly, I hadn't really thought about it yet, but I ended up having a job where I could sit down a lot.
Now, pause. Okay.
Give that a second to.
Give us a minute here.
Yeah, take a break here.
Okay.
So remember that thought when you left off? These don't work anymore.
These don't work anymore.
Yeah, no, okay. Hey, so this is great. You're relaxed. You're going into great detail.
A little too much detail?
Too much detail. We need to get
going.
First of all, we'll never get through this.
I know.
The other thing is, we want to talk about you. You know, you're talking about all these other people.
That's who I really would rather talk about.
I know, but we need to focus on that. So, but it's very interesting. But we're going to run out of time.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was about 25 minutes?
29.
Yeah. So we got to pick up the pace.
We got to pick up the pace.
All right.
Yeah.
So let me finish. When we come back on, we'll go back to.
We have the room till 5.
So here's what I want to cover. because I think these are the highlights of your life. It's nice to hear about, your all your grandparents and stuff,
I
but
think the back, though, I said this to Sherry the other night, I think, at least at the beginning, I'm glad we did it, even though now we're going to pick up some speed, because it's the background stuff that, I find more interesting. How did somebody end up doing this for a living? Where'd they come from and that kind of thing?
well, I think it helps if we tie it in at the end to your empathy for people, your varied background, and how it's influenced. And it's true. You're a very empathetic guy. You know when to be, when someone needs to be punished and when someone needs a break. And I mean, that's always been my impression of you. And so somehow we want to tie that together, maybe with your faith as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I want to get is
We rolling again yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
so we want to hit Loyola High School, your ties.
I want to go back to that, yeah.
And your brother
And I'll
is
talk
now the
about my
principal.
brother.
Your brother became a priest, which
Yeah.
emphasizes your
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah.
We'll
come back to that.
Your social life, and so you met Patty when you were in Santa Clara.
Nope,
right?
Loyola High.
Loyola High. Okay,
Yeah.
so we want to
We want to talk about that for sure. We got to come back to Loyola High.
and then we're going to
Not Servite, crummy
Yeah.
old Servite.
And then we're gonna
Rory
go-
is a friar.
Didn't make it? Didn't qualify?
So then we're going
We
to,
may not have been there yet.
and so then
It
we're
was
going
there. I think
to
it
jump
was.
to Santa Clara, and then what prompted your decision
Yeah.
to apply to law
Bingo.
school?
Yeah.
That's going to be Patty.
Yeah.
And then become a lawyer. Yeah, we'll talk about that, and then we're going to start hitting the highlights of your career.
Okay. We'll be there in a few minutes.
And I'm going to correct you on one thing about when we get back on. about,
Uh-oh.
Because in 1968, Notre Dame High waxed Loyola. We were 10-0.
That was Foley's year. Foley was a
and Bella.
quarterback, and Vela was the All-American tackle, and Chris Vela too. Both of those monsters.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had a lot of athletes in '68.
Yeah, and frankly, I wanted to ask this, but I was going to take up too much time. But just curious, you're in Glendale. You could have gone to Notre Dame High too, just as far as Loyola.
Notre Dame, though, in those days, it was just picking up steam. My year, Hank went, and a number of good athletes that were my friends that we kind of thought might go to Loyola, or they were going to go to St. Francis, one or the other. Those were the two. Notre Dame really wasn't on the radar nearly as much. It just came on the radar right about then.
Yeah, I was in Rick's class.
Yeah.
So of course, I played with Hank.
Yeah. Hank and Frank and all those Babcock boys.
So Loyola is a prominent Catholic high school in the area.
It was the oldest, at least.
I remember living in the Valley, taking an entrance exam to Notre Dame, and that was the place to go. Anyway.
It was kind of a little provincial, regional high school. That little.
Okay, so you were.
Oh, Beaver had been there.
That's right.
Jerry Mathers was at Notre Dame.
Do you remember Leave It to Beaver?
I do.
Jerry Mathers was.
He was about your age, maybe a little
He was
older.
a year ahead of me.
Yeah.
Nice guy. But
Beaver! Everybody tortured him.
Hey, Beav, you got a lot of that when you
That's
walked
no way
in.
to go through high school.
Oh, God.
So where were we when we?
We just thought we were at Loyola High.
Knees.
I just wrecked my knee and I couldn't
Okay.
play football
Get the
anymore.
job sitting a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. We ready to go?
Yeah, we are back on. Yeah.
Okay, so you've maintained your ties to Loyola over the years. Tell us about that.
It has meant a lot to me. As I was saying, once I couldn't play football anymore, I was really at a crossroads at my life at a very young age. I mean, I was 16 or 17 years old and my life was changing. I mean, it was such an unrealistic thought that I was ever going to do anything in the long term. But so I'm at Loyola High, and the Jesuits, there were a lot of Jesuits on campus back then, and they beat it into my mind that maybe there was something else I could do. And so I decided maybe I ought to study a little bit. And then they sort of drafted me, a Jesuit named Jim Flynn, who just passed away fairly recently, said, you should write for the newspaper. And so I ended up becoming the managing editor of the nursepaper and writing editorials and, running the newspaper my senior year. And we got a lot of awards. It was a pretty good newspaper. And I thought, wow, maybe there's something else that I could do with my life. Then, to reinforce that, my next brother, Greg, went to Santa Clara, also graduated from there, went to Loyola Law School, followed me. Rick went to Santa Clara Law School. As I'll explain in a minute, I didn't want to go to law school in Northern California. Finally, I thought, well, there's nothing else I can do. I was a history major in college. And so history majors' options are develop a career in the fast food industry, be a teacher, or go to graduate school, maybe a professional school maybe. And I wasn't smart enough to go to med school, obviously. And so, my dad talked me into looking at law school and considering it as an option. And so I did. Very important event. On October 12th, 1968, I was a junior at Loyola High. I had a little local girlfriend in Glendale that I had known since grammar school, but we were just kind of children. And one of my best friends called me on October 11th, that evening, which was a Friday night, and said, you need to help me. And I said, what can I do to help you? Take my girlfriend to the dance at Loyola tomorrow night, and she has just called me, we're going to the dance, but she can't go unless I get a date for her cousin who has just shown up at her house unexpectedly to spend the weekend, and her dad won't let her go to the dance unless I find a date for her cousin. And I said, you got to be kidding me. You asking me to go on a blind date with somebody's cousin? Have you ever met her? What's her name? What does she look like? Which is such an inappropriate question in hindsight probably, but it seemed appropriate in 1968 to a 16-year-old kid. And he didn't know anything about her. So I said, there's no way I'm going on this blind date. But eventually he wore me down, and I did. We show up at this house, his girlfriend's house, on Saturday night. Two attractive young women come to the door, both have mini skirts and knee boots on. The shorter of the two has this big, beautiful smile and looks at my friend and I and says, which one's mine? And I'm thinking this is the cousin. So I said, I guess I am. And I met Patty Overend that night, and we dated for the next 7 years, I think, all through college. She did not go to Santa Clara. She stayed in Southern California, but she took her year abroad. Her junior year, she came to Santa Clara rather than perhaps going abroad. And so my senior year, her junior year, she was at Santa Clara. Senior year is when I was deciding about law school, and she was going to come back to Southern California and graduate down here. And so I decided if I'm going to law school and I'm interested in this terrific young woman, I better come back. And so I applied to UCLA Law School, which I really didn't want to go to, and Loyola Law School, and got into Loyola, and I went there. And we continued to date after my second year of law school. I almost lost her, which was, it would have changed my life for the worst in 1,000 ways. Because when I graduated from college, and then when Patty got into college, so now I'm in law school, her dad, who ended up becoming one of my dearest friends, I knew him until the day he died, he told her to dump me. Because he said, this guy's never going to commit. We'd been dating 5 or 6 years, and he said, you got to dump this guy. He's never going to marry you. And I think she thought about it, but she didn't dump me. And about a year later, I went over and had the talk with her dad and said, can I marry your daughter? And he said, God bless us, it's about time. And so he said yes, and so we got married after my second year in law school. And so anyway,
So you moved, you moved back to Southern California to go to Loyola Law School because Patty was down here.
That was a huge part, yes. If I had not been chasing her as vigorously as I was, Rick had gone to Santa Clara and then Santa Clara Law School. But the other reason was, honestly, Rick had gotten married to that gal, Chris, his great wife that he was married to for the rest of his life, the mother of their 5 kids. And he wasn't coming back. She was very well established, and her family was very well established, and she just wasn't going to move to Southern California. I never heard that, but it was apparent, and he was willing to move. I really wanted to come back to Southern California also, just in general, but I might have stayed at Santa Clara. I had lots of friends at Santa Clara. Some of my friends were going to go to Santa Clara Law School. So who knows what would have happened. But it really sealed the deal that I should come back to Southern California. I wanted to practice in Southern California. Kind of wanted to live at the beach. I was kind of a beach guy.
Okay, so this explains why you came back to Southern California and the location of where you're going to get your legal education. It doesn't tell me, though, what changed your mind. When you were growing up, you were not attracted to the law, and now you're applying to law school.
Right. That's a good question. Again, I was a history major. I loved history. I still am a history guy. I not only like to kind of understand what happened, I like to figure out why it happened a little bit. So anyway, I think I'm like you in that respect a little bit. I remember when I was a senior in college at Santa Clara, history major, my dad, who by this point was a pretty successful lawyer, and my older brother was in law school, he said, "What are you going to do?" And my parents were great. I could not have had better parents. But they left us alone. I mean, it was a different time back then. Today, you said, I interviewed you for this interview a few years ago, and I remember discussing this subject with you. How'd you end up going to the college you went to? How'd you end up going to law school? Those kinds of things. And today, parents are so engaged and involved in those processes. It wasn't like that, at least for me 50 years ago, or for you, or for my brother, or people I knew. I mean, and part of it might have been we had 8 kids, and my mom and dad were my dad was busy in his career. My mom was busy raising the little kids who really needed her. They just said, "You're going to Loyola High." I went. I ended up at Santa Clara. I don't exactly know how, but my dad had gone there. My brother was going there. I mean, I'm not sure I gave it a whole lot of thought. I remember we did go there once when I was a little kid and walked around, but it really wasn't with a view of showing me a campus I might end up attending. I didn't give it a lot of thought. I wanted to stay in California for college. Santa Clara seemed like my brother was happy there. So I just went. I didn't think about it a whole lot. I got in. I went. Senior year, my dad said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And he didn't give us a lot of advice. He didn't push us in any direction, even though he was a lawyer and my older brother was in law school. I really never felt pressured to go to law school by my dad. But he did say, I remember, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know. Maybe I'll go to grad school and get a degree, an advanced degree in history and be a teacher." I've always been interested in writing, and even back then I kind of remember I had this thought in the back of my mind I was going to write a book about something. And he said, "Well, lawyers write an awful lot, and you're a pretty good talker. Maybe you talk too much, as this interview shows, but you like to talk and you like to read and write. That's what I do as a lawyer. I write letters and briefs and stuff, and I go to court and talk to judges and juries, and maybe you should think about that. And if you're ever going to go," he did say this, because I was dating Patty, and we had been dating by the time I was a senior for 5 years, maybe 6. And so I think my mom and dad saw that maybe something was going to happen there if I ever was willing to pull the trigger, and she was willing to say yes. And he said, "If you're ever going to go, you need to go now, because if you don't, you may get married and you'll have responsibilities and debt and maybe kids, and you'll never go back." And that kind of resonated with me. And I thought, all right, I'm not thrilled with it. I'm not Rick. I'm not somebody who was born and raised with the thought that I was going to be a lawyer, but maybe he's right. And so that resonated with me. And so I applied, and I did okay on the LSAT, and I got into Loyola, and so it just seemed like the right thing to do. So I went. But I will say, I hated law school. I watched a few of these interviews with other retiring justi to kind of prepare, see what other people had said and done, and most of them said they loved law school. I hated law school. I really did not like law school
Why?
at all. Well, number one, I didn't think I was very good at it. The whole first year, I was really concerned that I wasn't going to make it. I did not do very well in, the first year classes then were year classes, mostly torts, contracts, real property. And you didn't know how you were doing. But I remember we had a midterm at the end of the first semester in civil procedure. That was another year class. And I didn't do very well. And I thought, my gosh, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And so I was very insecure about it. And I didn't enjoy the Socratic method that much. You know, every day I was worried that somebody was going to call on me, and you know, I was called on like everybody else, and I'd have to stand up and get grilled, and I just didn't enjoy it that much. But I got through at the end of the first year. It turned out I did all right. I didn't do great, but I did all right. I was the last person, I think, on the dean's list. Every year I was the last person on the dean's list, grade point average wise. And so I did all right, but I didn't do great. I wasn't going to be the editor-in-chief of the law review. And I had no interest in being on the law review, never pursued it, never looked at it. I just wanted to get through it. And so I did.
And then the bar exam.
And the bar exam came, and that was a pretty big deal. That was like it. If you didn't pass the bar, it was going to be a big deal, and it was going to change your life. So I studied. I remember I had been married a year. Patty, after we got married, we wanted to move to Orange County, and I don't know why exactly, but we'd been exposed to Newport. Patty's family owned a house on Balboa Island that they rented, and they had bought that house in 1968 or 69 for $59,000. I'll never forget that. And they rented it. And then their family would go and spend 2 weeks every summer for vacation, but it was rented most of the time. And it had a little garage apartment, which was about as big as this chambers. And when we got married, we lived in that. We moved into that little garage apartment. It was one bedroom with a little galley kitchen and a little sitting area. It was one of the greatest places I ever lived in my life. It was fantastic. And Patty worked on Balboa Island. She could walk to work. I drove up to Loyola Law School the couple days a week in my last year that I had to go. But I was working for a law firm in Long Beach, so most of the time I would drive from Newport to Long Beach. I worked 3 days a week, and I went to school 2 days a week my third year. And so we get to the bar exam, and you know, we are as broke as anybody could be. We had no money, but we were living large. We were living on Balboa Island. How bad could it be? And so there was a lot of pressure to pass. I remember I studied every single day. It was whatever the number was, 71 days in a row. I was into it. I was going to study. I took the BAR class, and I took the exam up at the Long Beach Convention Center. And when that thing was over, I had no idea if I passed or not. I had no idea. But November came, and we got our results in those days the day after Thanksgiving. Everybody knew, and I passed.
And so tell us about how you got your first job.
I was working for this relatively small Long Beach law firm, civil firm. It was called Kiesel. It was called the Law Offices of Samuel Kiesel when I joined it. I got a job there the summer after my second year. So we got married. I told them when they hired me, I got to give me 10 days off because I'm going to get married and go on my honeymoon. I'll come back and go to work here. So I came back. I worked there. They were a little law firm. I was going to be like the 8th or 9th lawyer in the firm. While I was there, I worked there all senior year or third year of law school, 3 days a week. They liked me. I liked them in some ways. I had some reservations. They renamed the firm. Skip Kiesel made 2 of the young guys partners. I think he liked the name better, so the firm became known as Kiesel, Young, and Logan. It's still there. It grew to 150 lawyers or something like that. People I know, most of them have now retired, but I hear Skip's still there. He's got to be older than dirt now. So I would have made a lot of money working there. And they offered me a job. They thought I was going to take it. I never really said I was going to take it, but I sort of implied I was going to take it. Big salary, a new car, but I didn't want to work there. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And in those days, the way you became a trial lawyer, the accepted wisdom was go to work for a government office. And so that's what I was going to do. And so as soon as I had a chance after passing the bar, I applied at the Orange County Public Defender's Office because my dad had been a public defender in LA. I thought that was kind of a natural fit. But I also applied at the Orange County District Attorney's Office because I thought I could do that. And I had a couple of friends who were working there, and they liked it, and they encouraged me to do it. I interviewed at both. After I interviewed, pretty soon after I interviewed, it was a different process in those days. A guy who became a good friend of mine and a Superior Court judge named Ron Krieber called me. He was the training deputy in the DA's office. He's a big deal. He's an ex-LA cop and deputy DA. Called me up. I remember I was home in our little garage apartment. He said, Tom, this is Ron Krieber. I said, hi. Hi, Mr. Krieber. He said, you want to come to work at the DA's office? And I said, seriously? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. I didn't really think about it. I needed a job. The next day, Walt Zeck from the public defender's office, who was a guy you knew, I'm sure, called me and said, this is Walt Zeck from the public defender's office. I said, hi, Mr. Zeck. He said, you want to come to work for the public defender's office? I said, gosh, if you'd called me yesterday, I would have said yes, but Ron Krieber called me yesterday and I said I was going to do that. And he said, well, you can change your mind. Just call him back and tell him you change your mind. I said, I can't do that. And so that's how I became a deputy DA rather than a public defender.
And how long were you in the DA's office?
I was in the DA's office pretty much for the next 12 years. I left briefly to try civil practice for 6 or 8 months after 6 years. And it was a great experience with a great firm that's a big, successful firm now. I worked for Mark Robinson for a short time. And I like Mark still to this day, but at the time it just was not a good fit. So I went back to the DA's office, got into management when I returned. I ended up being one of the deputies in charge of the homicide unit, which was a terrific job. And then I got moved kind of against my will, and I was in charge of the writs and appeals section, the appellate section, which it turned out, even though I moved kicking and screaming because I wasn't going to be a trial lawyer, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I worked there for about 12 years.
And so you met your goal of trying cases. Roughly how many cases did you try?
I tried in the DA's office about 150 jury trials. And about half of those were muni court cases, which, really didn't take much preparation or thought. But I tried about 75 felony trials, and about 25 to 30 of those were murder cases. So I had a lot of experience, and 6 or 7 of those were death penalty cases as a prosecutor. So I was lucky enough. I had a lot of trial experience in the DA's office.
And you have some of the defendants you prosecuted ended up on death row. Is that right?
They did. 3 of them did. I tried 5 or 6 capital cases as a prosecutor, and 3 of those guys ended up on death row. 2 of them, as we sit here, I think are still there. One has since passed away. He didn't get executed. He just died of natural causes. And then a 4th the DA's office in those days never had a second chair situation. But my dear friend, Brian Brown, who was the other head of the homicide unit when I was there, one of the best trial lawyers I ever knew, he was charged with, after I was moved out of homicides and became the head of writs and appeals, he was charged with prosecuting a guy named Randy Kraft, who was one of the big serial killers in California history. Killed maybe upwards of 50 people. And it was a massive case. And Brian asked me to do the motion work. I was the head of writs and appeals then, and he was going to try it, and I was going to support him doing motion work. And I did all the motions throughout that trial, and he tried it. So that was kind of a hybrid situation.
So I assume that you approached these cases, you didn't approach these cases lightly, right? There was a lot of thought that went into whether to ask for the death penalty.
Indeed.
And how did the office and how did you handle that?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because it was during the 80s that that process became much more formalized in Orange County, and I think throughout the state. My first death penalty case I ever tried as a prosecutor, I'd been a DA 4 or 5 years. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was assigned this co-defendant case, Hefner and Vashotti, Brian Hefner and John Vashotti. I just got it. And it was a bad crime. It was a robbery murder, kind of an execution murder of 2 young people. One of them miraculously survived. And Vashotti was the shooter. But Hefner was there, and he was involved up to his armpits. And we didn't have any formal process. It was your case. You got to decide. Now, while I was after that, and Brian Hefner, I made a decision as a young prosecutor that he wasn't the shooter, and he didn't have any prior record. It was a bad crime. he was completely culpable, but I didn't think it was a case where he ought to get the death penalty. So I went up to court and told a very experienced judge, Bob Fitzgerald, who loved trying death penalty cases, I'm not going to seek the death penalty on this case. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I got to know later on in life, when I was a Superior Court judge, I ended up supervising Fitz, which was sort of ironic because he was so experienced. And even then I was much less experienced than he was. And he looked at me like I was crazy and yelled at me a little bit and said, what do you mean you're not going to seek the death penalty on this case? And I explained why, but I didn't do it. And so we tried it as a non-death case, and he was convicted and he got life without parole. But as a result of that, I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So I went and talked to Brian, and he went and talked to Jim Enright, who was the chief deputy, and we ended up looking at Los Angeles, the 10-ton gorilla in prosecutions in the state of California. And they were just beginning a process with their chief deputy of reviewing every case and making more formal decisions about which cases should be capital cases tried as capital cases and which should not. And Kurt Livesey was the guy's name in LA, and it developed that almost every county provided for what was known as a Livesey hearing. And we established that process in Orange County as well. And it became a more formal process where defense counsel, if they wanted to, would come in and talk to the prosecutor and a panel of people. And I sat on that committee in Orange County for the next 4 or 5 years, the Livesey committee. And we would talk to people and we would decide whether or not ultimately then the chief deputy and the district attorney himself ultimately made the decision, but we would make a recommendation. And the DA almost always, I can't remember when the DA ever didn't agree with our recommendation. And we recommended against seeking the death penalty in far more cases than we recommended seeking it.
So experienced prosecutors would evaluate the
Yes.
case and then and discuss it and decide whether to pursue the death penalty.
Exactly, and that procedure is still employed in Orange County and LA County and most of the major counties, I think, in California. They still do that.
You reminded me the other day that I participated in one of those.
That's right.
Yeah.
We had a case. The way we met was I was prosecuting a murder case and you were defending a murder case because you were in the public defender's office at the time. And we ended up having a Livesey hearing, and you came in, as I recall, and talked to us about it. And at the end of that process, we ended up not seeking the death penalty on that defendant that you represented.
So looking back on your career as a prosecutor, how did that, what impact on your life and your outlook on the law, how did that affect you?
It was a glorious time. When you're a prosecutor in a case that allows you to exercise your discretion, or in an office that allows you to exercise your discretion, you can't have a better job, especially if you're trying serious cases. I loved every minute of it. I loved being a prosecutor. I left reluctantly, but after 12 years, I had been in management a few years, and I wasn't trying cases anymore. And I had 3 children. Patty and I had been married we got married in 1976. I left the DA's office in 1990, so we'd been married 14 years. I had 3 children. I want to mention my kids. My oldest, Matt, was born in 1981, so he was 9. My daughter, Sarah, was born in 1983, so she was 7. My youngest son, Pat, was born in 1987, so he was 3. And I thought, honestly, I could see what the handwriting on the wall. I needed to make a little bit more money. And I was just professionally curious. I wondered if there was anything else I could do and make a living. And I had a couple of very close friends that I had known since college who were practicing, and they had a split civil criminal practice. Gary Polson was a criminal defense attorney. I met him in high school or college. We were good friends. He had been in the DA's office. He was one of the people I knew in the DA's office when I was working at the Kiesel firm. He had actually worked there, and he left and joined the DA's office, and he really encouraged me to join it. So I did, and then he, not long after that, he abandoned me and he went into private practice with another great young guy who also left the DA's office named Mike Horan, who you and I both knew very well. And they went out and established a practice. Then another lawyer that we had known in college named Gary Moorhead, who actually, when he graduated from law school, he worked for my dad. for 5 years as an insurance defense lawyer, and he wanted to move to Orange County. And so he and Paulson were friends. He joined, and it became Paulson, Horan, and Moorhead. And they were really dear friends, and they were having fun, and they were making some money. Then they lured another young lawyer from the public defender's office named Kathleen O'Leary. It became Paulson, Horan, Moorhead, and O'Leary. And I knew them all. I liked them all. I knew Kathy O'Leary. She was a deputy public defender. She had cases. We never tried a case against each other, I don't think. But we knew each other pretty well, and I liked her. So they're kind of luring me. And then, before I make a decision to jump ship from the DA's office, Kathy O'Leary gets appointed to the municipal court and becomes the youngest municipal court judge, I think, in California. She was in her early 30s. To bring it full circle, Kathleen O'Leary is now the presiding justice of this Court of Appeal that I've been sitting on for the last 7 years. She's a dear friend of yours and mine. We've known her for a long time. So she left. Then Horan left. He just decided to spin out on his own. So it's Paulson and Moorhead. They both say, you could really do well. And when I left the DA's office, I had this vision that I didn't want to just do criminal defense work. I wanted to do plaintiff's work and maybe even some defense civil work. And so I did that. And so I joined them. And so it became Paulson, Moorhead, and Goethals. They both thought I was nuts. We'll get to why I left them. Probably after working there for a dozen years, I left them and applied for the bench. And we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about that when we come back.
That's good.
We're making progress.
We're making progress.
We made good progress.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's still
somewhere?
We're finally
real
getting
interesting.
somewhere.
I got to pee again. Just-
I got to just stand up.
Yeah.
No worries at all.
This getting old thing. I just had an MRI on my back yesterday because when you see me hobbling around here,
Yeah,
I got 2 new hips and a new knee.
right.
But the doctor I went to see a couple months ago, he says, and I thought this is my newer hip, and when I walk a long way with my wife, my hip starts really hurting,
Right.
but I just ignore it. And he says, it's not your hip. He x-rays my hip, and the doctors aren't going to say they ever did anything wrong. He says, it's not your hip, it's your back. Your back is bad, so you need to go see a guy for your back. So I did that last week, and he made me have an MRI yesterday, and so I'm going to go see him again next week, and I got some disc issues in my back.
So no results yet, though, right?
I just had it yesterday. Was in that tube head first for a half hour.
Right.
That's no fun, but it's all right. It's all right.
I'm glad I'm not in this because I can slouch and move around and
Look at your notes.
yeah, I don't have to worry about that stuff. Okay.
What did we just say we were going to come back with?
So you're
Oh, I left. I'm leaving the DA's office.
well, you've left the DA's office.
Yeah.
You've joined.
Paulson and more.
Yeah, and actually kind of jumped ahead that you were about to leave them. So we might want
Oh,
to
yeah.
talk.
Let's go back and talk about Paulson and Moorhead for a minute.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about how you broadened your
Yeah.
legal. You did civil cases.
I will.
And
Yeah.
and you did some of that stuff. So
So when we come back,
and
I'm
then
at Paulson
and then,
Moorhead for
then we really
12
get
years.
into the meat of things. This is when you're deciding to apply to the bench and
Yeah.
how that affected your family and
Yeah.
what went into all that and the financial sacrifice that was involved and the
I'm not sure I'm
9/11
going
and
to
all that
characterize
stuff.
it as a sacrifice, but I certainly was making less money.
Well,
You make a decision.
you had you had kids that are going to go to college.
Indeed.
And so,
All at private Catholic colleges. Yikes.
yeah. It looked to me like that's a little bit of a sacrifice, but
It was certainly, my wife thought I was nuts, and my partners thought I was nuts. That's what we're going to talk about too.
Yeah.
And then they end up both applying to the bench and being judges. They've always been as nuts as they thought I was.
you might mention that. It's kind
I
of
am.
funny that they both criticized you and thought you were crazy for doing that. And by the way, they're retired judges.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Follow that. All right. So we're at about an hour of total recording. So you're thinking one more, 2 more?
I'm thinking
We've got
about
one more hour.
One
I
more.
think.
I don't think we should go more than another hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna be around 2 hours.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right.
You're not going to edit this, are you? Or can you edit it?
I could. It would take me forever. No, I'm going to ship all this up San Francisco.
And see what they want to do. I think that's the
You
ticket.
cut and paste however you want to make
I
it
think
work.
that's the ticket.
Yeah, because 2 hours is a long time. I don't, but
I looked at ours yesterday. I didn't look at every, but we went about an hour and 47 minutes.
is that right? I
Yeah.
think, I bet a lot are about 2 hours because,
Buck Compton is longer. Buck Compton is
yeah,
like 3 or 4 hours.
there's a lot to cover.
Fibo, I didn't look at all of Fibo's. God bless him.
Yeah.
And he was about an hour and 45 minutes too. So I was thinking if we get in that neighborhood, that's kind of where I think we should be.
Okay.
All right. Ready to feeling? Shake it out.
Yeah.
It's all good?
All right. Okay.
Okay, so you're now in private practice, and so that I imagine was a little bit of an adjustment, but it was something that you wanted to do. So tell us about your experience in private practice.
It was terrific. I practiced with Polson and Moorhead as a firm known as Polson, Moorhead and Goethals for about 12 or 13 years. They were my dear friends when I started. They are still my dear friends, and that is not always the case, as you probably know. A lot of people start out as friends and then they start arguing about things, mostly money, and they don't end up friends. We never, I think Gary Polson, Gary Moorhead, and I, in 12 years, we never argued about anything really. And they were like my brothers. They still are, especially since I lost my older brother. I still have 2 great brothers, but they were, kind of peer brothers. I still regard them as dear friends and brothers. We just had lunch together a couple weeks ago. I will add right now while I'm thinking of it, when I left after 12 years, and I'll tell you why if you ask me, both of them thought I was nuts. We were making money.
Nuts because you were leaving to go to the bench.
Yes, I applied to the bench in 2001 or 2002, and they thought I was crazy. They couldn't understand why I would do that. And it was a tough call.
Because you were making money.
We were making money and we were happy and we had independence. And then, after I'd been on the bench about 10 years, both of them are now retired Superior Court judges. They both had their careers and have retired before me, and they both loved being judges, and I guess I wasn't as crazy as they thought. So they both became very successful, highly regarded judges also. Anyway, I joined them. We become known as Polson, Moorhead, and Goethals. The plan executed exactly as we hoped it would. Polson remained a well-regarded criminal defense attorney who tried a lot of serious cases, capital cases, other cases. Moorhead was a very well-regarded, successful plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. And when I joined him, I said, I'd like to do both. I'd like to fit in between, make appearances, try serious criminal cases, which I did. I ended up being part of the appointment list for capital cases as a defense lawyer in Orange County. So I did that. I tried 3 or 4 capital cases as a defense attorney. It was said when I applied for the bench, I don't know if this is true, I think it is. It was true at the time. When I became a Superior Court judge, I tried some capital cases, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I was told that at that time I was the only judge in California who had prosecuted a capital case, defended a capital case, and presided over a capital case. So that was kind of a distinction that was interesting.
It is.
So I did that. I also tried personal injury cases. I tried civil cases as a lawyer in private practice. Some I tried with Moorhead because he was a really good lawyer. We tried a long case out in Riverside, road design, wrongful death case against the state of California for a couple months, and we prevailed on that. And those are not easy cases, not easy to beat Caltrans, but we did. I tried other civil cases by myself sometimes with Moorhead. And so I really learned a lot and grew as a human being, I hope, and I think, and more importantly, as a lawyer. I grew a lot as a lawyer. I learned an awful lot. As a judge, I was a much better judge, having had that opportunity to work with guys who I respected so much and who were such good lawyers and were such a pleasure to be partners with. It was just a great experience.
So the client experience must have been different in contrast to criminal cases.
You mean the civil clients?
The civil clients, right.
It was different. Your relationship with your clients is different. I mean, I represented a couple of guys charged with capital murder, and that was a different experience. I'd always been on the other end of the table, and I didn't have any insight into who these people were really, except they had committed these horrible crimes. And it was different sitting next to somebody charged with a capital murder from a personal responsibility standpoint, even if you didn't like them, and I didn't particularly like them. It was a tremendous responsibility, feeling that the only thing that stood between you or between them and death row was you. So that was an interesting. And one guy that I represented was sentenced to death by one of my future colleagues. And he's still sitting up there on death row next to some guys I prosecuted who ended up on death row. I have no idea how that works, but he's there.
But you're still, even if you have some reservations about the moral judgments and culpability of your clients, you're still engaged in an important function, that is preserving their constitutional rights and representing the best you can. I know you did that.
I could not agree with you more. When I left the DA's office, and especially when I became part of that, there were only about a dozen lawyers in Orange County who the court determined were qualified to represent these guys who were indigent and the public defender could not represent in capital murder cases. And so I'm one of those guys. And when I ended up making appearances and trying those cases, it was always against my former colleagues in the DA's office, some of whom were my good friends, some I didn't know as well because years had passed, but some of them were my good friends. Brian Brown, who is still one of my best friends, and who was still in charge of the homicide unit. I think the first time I ever appeared, he said, what are you doing here, And we've talked about it a lot, and he now understands. Just had dinner with Brian and Jan a couple of weeks ago, and he now understands. He's been retired for a number of years. But they didn't understand how I could do that. And they thought I was a traitor and all this. And honestly, I would look them in the eye. I never lost a minute's sleep, and maybe I wasn't smart enough to see that there was some sort of conflict there. But I said to them, you don't understand what our role is. My role now is exactly as it was when I was a prosecutor. It's to protect the integrity of the system, make sure that only guilty people are convicted, steal for these guys. And I told them that. I'm not going to lie or cheat or steal for you, but I'm going to give you the most vigorous professional defense I can, because that's my job, is to test the system and make sure that it works correctly. And I still feel that way. When I became a judge, I always felt the same way, that was my job, and most of them eventually sort of accepted that, but some of them didn't. Some of them always took it personally.
Yeah, some of them might not like the fact, because of your skill, that some guilty people might not have been convicted.
I'm not sure that ever happened, but I mean, I got some pretty good results on the defense side in homicide cases. And again, I've never lost any sleep over that, because I think my job is to protect the integrity of the system, whether I'm a prosecutor, a defense attorney, or a judge. That's my job. And I have always kept that kind of as a focus of my attention.
And that is putting the state to the test to carry the burden of proof.
I believe that that's true, and I believe that that's true.
Okay, so you're doing well in private practice. What prompted the decision to go to the bench, since you had for years told me that that was not something that was that you had contemplated?
I had real reservations about it. You and I have been friends for 40 years, and I had other mentors. When I got to the Court of Appeal, and you had been here for 15 years or whatever it was, I said that I would be your life coach, and you would be my professional mentor. And you gave me a lot of good advice. But I had other professional mentors. A couple who immediately spring to mind were Jim Smith, who was the presiding judge of the Orange County Superior Court. I met Jim in 1979 or 80. He was a Muni Court judge out in West Court, and he was a runner. And I was just starting to be a runner. With my bad knee, ironically, crazily, somebody said years ago, you need to strengthen that leg so to take some stress off the joint. And so back in those days, running was a big deal. Jim Fix had written that famous book. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to be a runner. So I go to Westcourt, and Jim ran every day at noon out there, and he took me under his wing, and we became very, very close friends, and he was a professional mentor. When I got moved over to Santa Ana as a young prosecutor, by then I think Jim had been elevated to the Superior Court. He's here, he's running every day at noon. Another Superior Court judge here who was a DA, who became a mentor of mine as a young DA. Why he took me under his wing, I have no idea. He was at the very top of the pyramid, I was at the very bottom. Was a guy named Dave Carter, who was a Superior Court judge for 20 years. Then he got moved to the federal bench. He's still sitting across the street today as a federal district court judge. He's still a dear friend of mine. And I must have run thousands of miles with you and Jim and Dave. And I got such great advice from all of you over the years, and other people too. The group built over the years, and some days a dozen of us would go out and run together. DAs, public defenders, some bailiffs, deputy sheriffs, a lot of Superior Court judges. And so I was lucky enough to get this kind of advice. So anyway, several of you had suggested over the years, maybe you ought to think about being a judge. And I honestly was happy. I liked being a lawyer. I liked being a trial lawyer. In my whole life as a trial lawyer, prosecutor, and on the other side, I tried about 200 jury trials. And I loved it. There were parts of it I didn't like. The stress of it, it does take its toll on you. And I sort of thought at some point I was going to run out of gas. I think every lawyer has X number of jury trials in him. Paulson, before he took the bench, has told me he tried 300 jury trials. I mean, I don't know how you do that, and he loved it, but he ran out of gas at 300. As I was approaching 200, I sort of thought, I'm not tired yet, but I'm running out of gas.
Yeah, there are only so many 4 hours sleeping, getting 4 hours of sleep a night for 2 or 3 weeks.
And no weekends and all that.
How can you can't do that.
And it takes a toll on your personal life. We had 3 kids. Now, in the year 2000, Matt is now 19, Sarah's 17, Pat is 13. Matt is a freshman in a full freight private college. Sarah's a senior in high school at a full freight private high school on her way to a full freight private college. But in 2000, I'm starting to, at least there's a glimmer that maybe someday I would think about it. I'm in my late 40s, but I'm still kind of in the prime of my professional life, I'm thinking. But I'm starting to look at the financial reality. And my beautiful wife, who I've now been married to for 24 years, is saying, what are we going to do about having our kids go to college and this, that, and the other thing? And, so we're starting to talk about those realities that are on the horizon. Then, honestly, September 11th came, and that was one of those pivotal moments in my life. I talked about going to Loyola High School, wrecking my knee playing football, these various pivotal moments. I don't know why, but it was a pivotal moment in my life. One of the reasons was, I think, I come from kind of a military-oriented family. One of my grandfathers was a career naval officer. My mom's dad, he retired as a rear admiral after World War II. I have a picture of my chambers of John F. Kennedy. And I remember I was a young kid. I was 6 or 8 years old, and I was at my grandparents' house. They lived in Riverside. No, excuse me. They lived in Long Beach after he retired from the Navy, where retired naval officers in those days, in the 50s, who lived on the West Coast, either lived in San Diego or Long Beach, because there were 2 big bases there. My grandparents ended up living in Long Beach for the rest of their lives. Whenever another child would be born in our family, which there are 6 younger siblings, I'd get shipped off to stay with them for a few weeks. My older brother would stay with my other grandparents. So I would stay with them a lot, and I was very close to them. And I'll never forget sitting there in their little apartment one day, and the mail comes, and my grandfather is opening the mail, And it is a manila envelope, like an 8 by 10 manila envelope, and he's going through the mail and he looks at it. I don't know why I was there watching him do this, but I remember it distinctly. And in the upper left corner, there's a return address, the White House. And, even at that age, I knew what the White House was. And he opens it up, and it's an autographed picture from John F. Kennedy. And it says, to Arthur Thomas Moen, USN, for United States Navy, with gratitude for your service to your country, or something like that. The inscription's up in my room, and it's signed by John F. Kennedy. And he was a naval officer during World War II who was seriously injured when his PT boat was run over by a Japanese destroyer in the South Pacific. And he never lost his affection for the Navy. And we heard later that for all the retired flag officers from World War II, he for some reason, he sent them all autographed pictures. And so my grandfather got one of those. And so he was a retired naval officer, career officer, served with distinction. My other grandfather served as a naval officer in World War I. He then got out and went to work for the cement companies. My father-in-law was a decorated combat veteran of World War II. He went in as a private. He was in college. He enlisted soon after Pearl Harbor in the Army, went in as a grunt private, eventually is shipped off to Italy, serves the last 2 or 3 years of the war as a combat infantryman. He wore proudly for the rest of his life that blue combat infantry badge, that long rifle on the blue field as a lapel pin. He ended up being discharged as a lieutenant. He was a Mustang officer. He won the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart, which he never talked about ever until the very end of his life. And then he talked about it a little bit, but he was one of those classic members of the greatest generation who said, the only heroes are the ones who didn't come home. And he really did believe that. And a lot of his friends didn't come home. My dad was a United States Marine, and he just missed. He was only 17 on December 7th, 1941. He was a freshman at Santa Clara. He could not enlist. When he turned 18 in May of 1942, he and his buddies went and enlisted in the Marines, but they were only 18, and he got this deal that they were going to make them officers. And so they sent them to OCS, and at that time, the Marines they took over the campus of the College of the Pacific, now the University of the Pacific in Stockton, and they started college there, and they were going to be commissioned on the day they graduated. And they did an accelerated program, and so they all graduated from college in 3 years, but they graduated from college in early 1945. The class ahead of them were the second lieutenants who went ashore at Iwo Jima. And about half of that class didn't come back. And so my dad and his friends were all commissioned. They were all training to lead the Marines ashore for the invasion of the home islands in Japan.
Yeah.
And that's what they were going to do. And another story I remember about my grandfather, and obviously we didn't invade the home islands because the United States is the only country that has ever used atomic weapons, and we dropped bombs in August of 1945 on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then the Japanese surrendered. And I remember another story from staying with my grandparents was, I don't know how we would have ever talked about this because I'm an 8 or 10-year-old kid. And my grandfather told me once, we were talking about his life as a naval officer and all the things he had done. And he ended up dying of cancer in 1963. And we're pretty sure he died because one of the things he did was, as a naval officer in the South Pacific, the Navy sent him and like 10,000 servicemen to observe one of the test bombs, explosions of the atomic bombs at Bikini Atoll. And, it's pretty clear a lot of them got radiation sickness. And my grandfather died of cancer in 1963, probably related. But he said to me, we're talking about all this, and he said, I said to him, atomic bombs, because in the early 60s, we were all scared to death. It was right around the time of the the Bay of Pigs, and we thought we were going to go to war with Cuba, and Russia and the United States were going to exchange nuclear volleys. And I have no idea why we would have been talking about this. And he said, it was a terrible thing, but you might not be here if we hadn't done that. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, your dad was going to go ashore, and there was an estimate of 1 million casualties. That's why Harry Truman ultimately decided to use atomic bombs against Japan to try to force them to surrender. And I'm not giving any moral judgment about this, but my grandfather had a pretty strong opinion that given the circumstances at the time, President Truman made the right decision. And you might not be here because your dad would have led those ashore, and there were going to be 1 million casualties, and who knows if he would have survived.
So you had this history in your family
of public service. I did.
And so after 9/11 now, you must have felt the calling.
And it even going back further, when I wrecked my knee, a lot of people I knew in college got drafted and went to Vietnam. I was a product of the Vietnam War. Seeing Bob Curlin back then, Bob Curlin said, that orthopedic surgeon who told me you get a job to sit down, he said, do you want me to write a letter to the draft board? And I didn't even respond, but I remember my dad did, and I was in high school. No, I must have been in college. But in the mail one day, I didn't do anything. I got my draft card and I was 4F because of my knee. And I always felt guilty about that. My whole life, I kind of felt guilty about that. And another reason that I didn't mention earlier as to why I felt kind of called to work for the DA's office or the public defender was a lot of my friends had gone to Vietnam. I didn't have to go, and I never really had to worry about it. I was 4F. And I was not, at least in my own mind, I was a pretty physically able person. I was a runner for 40 years. I ran thousands of miles. I worked out. I was kind of athletic, I always felt guilty about that a little bit. And so I thought I should do public service. I did 12 years in the DA's office. I got out. I'm having a good time in private practice. But when September 11th came, 2001, I felt, and I was 50 years old, I felt a very strong calling to go back, as corny as this sounds, go back to public service. And so I pretty soon thereafter got an application. I filled it out. I didn't think anything was going to happen, to be honest. I thought it would be a while, because by that point I had 2 kids, full freight in private colleges, and another on his way. He was in high school and he was going to follow them probably.
So it typically took a year to 2 years to process an application, even a successful application, and to get appointed. So you thought you had some time to earn some more money. And
when I told Patty I was going to apply, she was always very supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And I always supported her in her career choices and stuff. I think we've been very supportive of each other. And she said, do whatever, are you sure? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but I'm going to do it. And she did say, how much does it pay? And I told her it was going to be at least a 50% pay cut. Even in a bad year, it was going to be a 50% pay cut. And she said, can we do this? And I said, dear, Matt will be out of college. Sarah will probably be out of college. Pat will be in college. But we're saving some money, and, we can do this if it happens. And I applied in March or April, and it was December. I'll never forget my assistant at the firm. I'm in court, just working for a living. My assistant calls and says, I think we had cell phones then. This is 2002, December of 2002. So I can't remember if we had cell phones or not, but I would call the office on a payphone or something. And she said, Bert Pines called you. And he said he's from the governor's office. Bert Pines, who had been the city attorney of LA, ended up being a Superior Court judge. And I had interviewed with him so we thought maybe it was moving along.
Pines is the appointment secretary.
He was the appointment secretary. He was Gray Davis's appointment secretary. And I had interviewed with him like in September or October, so I thought, what does that mean? Usually you don't get the interview until maybe you're getting close. But the interview was a wild interview, and I thought, well, I could have screwed that up. I mean, maybe I'm not going to get appointed anyway.
He was famous for his tough interviews.
Oh, it was the toughest interview I ever had in my life. And I had no idea if I had been successful in that. But anyway, so just not too long before Christmas, December of 2002, I hear that Bert Pines called, and he was told I was in court, and he told my assistant, will he be back by 6 o'clock? Tell him to be in the office at 6 o'clock because I'm going to call him back. So I thought, well, gosh, he's either going to tell me I completely failed the interview, or he's going to say the governor wants to appoint me. I'm thinking optimistically, so I call Patty and I say, you're not going to believe this, dear, but Bert Pines called today, and I may get appointed tonight. And sure enough, he calls back at 6, and he says the governor wants to appoint you. Will you accept the appointment? And I had told Patty that, and she said, can we afford this? Are you sure?
What year was this now?
This was 2002, December of 2002. And again, Matt was a junior at Loyola Marymount University in LA, and Sarah was a freshman. Full freight, no help at all. And Matt was a varsity athlete, but he didn't get any help. But anyway, so I made a leap of faith. And
who swore you in?
Rick Toohey, my dear friend, swore me in. I got sworn in very quickly. I left the firm very quickly. I don't know how I was able to even do that, but he swore me in. They were going to announce it. Bert Pines, when he called me, said, we're going to announce it on December 29th, so don't tell anybody. But we were going to have a Christmas party. He called me like 2 days, like December 21st or 22nd, and my family always gets together on Christmas Eve, and so all my remaining siblings, I want to mention them all. Rick had passed away. Greg, I'm the second oldest. Greg, Betsy, Margie, Katie, Art, and Chrissy. And we've always gotten together every Christmas Eve for our entire lives, and we were going to get together. And I said, can I tell my siblings and their spouses, all of whom are great? And he said, well, I can't tell you. You're really not supposed to, but I told them all. And they were all kind of dumbfounded, but I told them. And then he said, but don't tell anybody else. There's going to be a press release on December 29th, and there was. And I got sworn in, I think on January 2nd, 2003. So somehow, Paulson and Moorhead said, you got to go. And we figured out somehow how they were going to handle my cases, and I went.
What was your first assignment?
I went to North Court on a general misdemeanor, kind of muni court.
For those that don't know, North Court's Fullerton.
North Court in Orange County has courts. The main court is in Santa Ana, one in Westminster, which is West Court, Fullerton, North Court, Newport Beach, Harbor Court, and in those days, New Laguna Niguel, South Court, plus a juvenile court in Orange. And so it was the furthest court from my house. And I said, please don't send me there, but they said that's what the needs of the court require. So
and what were you?
It was a muni court assignment. A criminal muni court assignment.
So misdemeanors,
traffic
citations,
traffic, small claims, all that. I did that for a year, and then I went to West Court. And we're going to take another short break.
Okay.
And this time I got to pee. We're at an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. God help us.
Time flying, man.
Yeah, well, we're doing okay.
We've picked up some speed. I'm a judge now. You want to pee first, or you want me to pee?
No, go ahead.
All right. It was that coffee this morning, I can tell you.
Yeah, I had a lot to drink, and
coffee
then, I got this old prostate, so.
Yeah, we're back at fighting strength, 100% again.
All right. So how are things? A lot of new people, huh?
Yeah, we had that. I called the class picture that's down on the first floor, where it was everybody.
Yeah.
It feel like half have changed over since then.
Yeah.
Just getting crazy.
Yeah. As you walk in downstairs, where the public comes in, they used to have the justices' pictures up. My picture was up there.
Right.
What do you do with those? Put those in a closet when?
No, Janet has a plan for them. I think they're actually going somewhere. I thought they were in the conference room lobby is where the retirees are
I
at,
probably put them someplace.
I think. Yeah. Near the dartboards. No. I think that's where they're at.
That doesn't matter. I was just curious.
They do have a life after. They're not just rugbyers. They do actually they stick around. It's not as bad as all that.
Huh.
But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So with Kelly taken off, I have become the third most senior person in the building.
Wow.
Just like, really?
Who are the two that are ahead of you?
Sarah Annis and Todd Buxton. So.
Oh, that's right, Todd. Yeah. Wow. Who's Todd working for? Do you know?
Who did he get moved over to? No, Scott. Sure. We're shifting everybody around. So I got 2 more moves tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know anybody that. Where's he at? The phone listed there? No.
Yeah, that's. I was just curious. I'll ask Tom. He'll know. It's all these new justices too. In fact, I don't really know. I mean, I know Tom Delaney. I know Mo a little bit. I don't really know Joanne hardly at all. I know Martha very well.
Okay.
So that's and Kao's leaving.
Right.
God, Eileen, the group that I worked with. Eileen will be the last when Kao leaves. Eileen will be the last one of that group. God, 2 of those people that I worked with are dead. It's just
That's the crazy part.
yeah.
Beds was my last first. Because Kao actually started literally a month after I did, or maybe 2 months. So I had Justice Sills, Crosby, Rylersdam, and Beds, and we lost 3 of those.
Yeah.
So, geez, I should have retired. It's a good idea.
Sills, Rotterdam, Beds,
Crosby.
and Crosby. Oh, that's right, Tom. God. And then Wallen.
Right. I never got to work with Wall.
Oh, you never worked with Wallen. Okay.
No, he preceded me.
Huh.
I'm sure he's pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
But he is also passed on, or?
Wallen died last year sometime. Who's Todd working for? Vixen or Buxton?
Mo, I think.
Is he?
Is that everyone do? Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I can't keep track where everybody's moved off to.
Did you notice that Ray's Michigan sticker is still on the mirror?
No, I
That's pretty cute.
Oh yeah, how about
That's
that?
cute. That's cute. We can never move that. I love that. Oh, Rory, how can there be so much to talk about?
Would you say 50 years the other day?
50,
From your
50 years.
What graduation was the college graduation? Or
No,
law
50,
school?
50 years ago I started, 51 now. I started law school. 50 years ago last summer.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
And a lot of interesting things have happened, I would say.
Yeah.
Is that the way it was? Not exactly.
Maybe up a little bit, a
Okay.
little bit closer to you. Right about there, yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, we've had a lot of, gosh. I mentioned my parents, I mentioned my siblings, I haven't mentioned my grandkids yet. Got to mention them, come on.
Excellent local IT staff. I'm sure that's somewhere on the list.
I'm going to talk about that at the very end. Some thank yous to, especially the IT staff.
That'll be cut pretty quickly. I don't see that making it through editing.
Okay, let's see. Where were we when we?
Okay.
We were just, I went to North Court, you asked me where I was assigned first.
Yeah, and now you went to North, and then you.
Went to West,
Went
and
to
then
West.
Santa Ana. So we're going to pick up some speed.
I'm going to ask you about the transition.
Feeling know where we're at?
Okay, so tell me about the adjustment from being an advocate to being a judge. Was that hard? How did that? What was your impression, and how did you handle that?
I thought it was going to be harder than it was, honestly. I was very concerned about it. I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of you folks, as we were running over the years when I was in private practice, had suggested maybe I should think about being a judge. And I was concerned about whether I would be able to transition from being what I thought was a vigorous advocate to being a neutral, to being a judge. And as it turned out, it wasn't that hard. I had to think about it initially and recall that I wasn't an advocate anymore, especially when a lawyer would say or do something that I thought was stupid. I had to remind myself, you're a neutral now. Don't argue as if you were an advocate. And maybe it took me a little while to have that sink into my mind, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it might be. You guys were right.
A lot of people have difficulty making that transition. You were one of the more accomplished trial judges, or trial lawyers rather, in the county. You were just an outstanding trial attorney. You also were a legal scholar, if I might give you that compliment.
That's just what I asked you to say. That's well said.
But here you are on the bench now, and you may see a lawyer do something that is, as you said, is ill-advised, to the detriment of justice, to distort an outcome that justice would require. How did you manage to keep quiet under those circumstances? Because that's what you're required to do.
I think that's a challenge for any judge, and it was a challenge for me. I think there is a conflict between a situation, or when you see a situation when one of the lawyers is really misbehaving or just isn't very good. And you have to ask yourself, should I put my thumb on the scale a little bit to even out the fight? And generally, I don't think we're supposed to do that. And generally, I tried not to do that. Can I guarantee that I never did that? Probably not. Because if it was a situation where I really thought it was going to impact the outcome in terms of the sense of was justice going to be done, you tried to subtly figure out a way perhaps to make sure that justice was still achieved in that case. And that's not easy. That's not easy, and I'm not going to say I was good at it. But that's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, there's a fine line between clarifying the evidence for the jury and crossing that line, and which would help one side or the other.
I should be clear. I didn't see very often a situation where I thought a lawyer was intentionally lying or cheating or stealing, really acting inappropriately. I'm not saying I've never seen that, because I have seen it once or twice, where a lawyer I thought really did something inappropriate. But that doesn't happen very often. Sometimes, honestly, just one lawyer is better than the other, maybe more prepared or more skilled. And in that circumstance, it's really hard to decide how you're going to deal with that if you think that circumstance is going to impact justice being achieved. But I think you got to be very careful. You got to be very careful. And I tried to be.
What were some of the notable cases that you had in your career? And how many years were you in Superior Court?
About 15. I tried, I was the air traffic controller for the Orange County Superior Court criminal felony trial departments for 2 years, in 2009 and 2010. So I'd been a judge about 7 or 8 years, and Tom Boris, who was the presiding judge then, who I had known and was my friend, we had worked together in the DA's office. He came to me one day when I was in Westcourt and said, I'm going to bring you over to Santa Ana, and you're going to be the supervising judge of all the felony trial departments. And we had more than 20 then, so we were a pretty big trial operation. I said, Boris, I'm way junior. I mean, a lot of those judges were judges I had tried cases in front of when I was a young lawyer. I said, I'm too junior to do that. And for some reason, he was convinced that I was the person who ought to do it. So, kicking and screaming, figuratively, I came over, and I did that for 2 years. And it was
Department 5.
Department 5, which you have, 100 cases come through there every day, arraignments, pre-trials, cases ready for trial or circulating there, and you're trying to find homes for them, and you do a lot of stuff, and you're the administrative lead of all the felony trial departments. So it's a very interesting job. It's a hard job. It's probably the hardest job I ever had as a judge. You're really busy, and plus you got a lot of paperwork you're doing. You have lawyers who are your staff lawyers, and it's a really busy, challenging, great job. Dave Carter had done it, Jim Smith had done it, and so I thought, well, like, I can do it, and I'm glad I did. It was a really educational process. But in those days, and I think it maybe is still true, when you get to the end of the 2 years, the presiding judge comes and says, what do you want to do? And Boris, I guess, was still maybe the presiding judge, and he said, "What you're going to go to long cause now." And it really never had occurred to me that's what was going to happen. And I said, "Really? Can I have one of those jobs?" And there are 4 or 5 judges out of the 120 or so in Orange County who are designated long cause criminal trial judges, and they get the longest, most serious, most interesting, best represented cases. And so I moved out of Department 5 on the second floor and went up to Department C41 on the top floor. And after being in that courtroom for a couple of years, Frank Brzezino, the senior judge in the history of Orange County, retired. He had been sitting in C45, the biggest courtroom in Orange County. And somebody came and said, "You're going into C45." And I had tried a lot of cases in C45 in front of some of the giants in Orange County judicial history. And suddenly that was my courtroom. And so for the next few years, I tried mostly murder cases in front of, or involving really good, experienced prosecutors and defense attorneys. Very interesting, some capital cases. One day in 2012 or 13, so I'd been in there for a year or two, I am informed that a case called People versus Scott DeCry is coming to my courtroom. Mr. DeCry was a notorious case because he had allegedly killed 8 people and he'd shot another who had miraculously survived out at a hair salon in Seal Beach on October 12, 2011. And the case had been bouncing around a little bit. I found out later that it had been assigned first to 2 other judges, both of whom had been papered. The DA papered one, the public defender's office papered the other, so I got it sort of by default. But I got it, and nobody had a paper left, so I was going to get it. And that case, the reason I'm here today in this job is because of People versus DeCry. I presided over that case for the next 6 years, and it got tremendous attention. It was by far the most interesting and challenging case I ever had. There wasn't much question about Mr. DeCry's guilt. There were dozens of eyewitnesses. He confessed. There was a tremendous amount of physical evidence, but the manner in which the case was investigated and handled by the sheriff's office here in Orange County and the district attorney's office became a matter of great controversy. Mr. DeCry, by some act of fate or fortune, had a deputy public defender represent him. In fact, a team of public defenders represent him. And the lead public defender, a lawyer named Scott Sanders, who still works for the public defender's office and received national notoriety as a result of this case, all well-deserved. He did an unbelievable job. And he demonstrated over the course of hearings that lasted for years that the sheriff and the district attorney's office had engaged in significant misconduct. And although I didn't believe it for a long time, ultimately I made findings about that. I kicked the district attorney's case district attorney's office off the case in its entirety. The Attorney General, Kamala Harris, took over the case, and the Attorney General handled it for the last year or two, and eventually I removed the death penalty as a penalty option. And Mr. DeCry pled guilty to 8 first-degree murders, admitted the special circumstances and a first-degree that term, and he's in prison now. But that case was editorialized about in the New York Times, it was editorialized about in the Washington Post, it was editorialized about in the Los Angeles Times, it was editorialized about in the Orange County Register, the ABA, the National American Bar Association wrote multiple articles about it. 60 Minutes ran a feature piece about it. Anyway, suffice it to say, it got a lot of publicity, and And people in the entire California legal community knew about it, and I was told that the governor, Jerry Brown, knew about it. And it was a tough piece of litigation. You know, you want to ask me a question, but I will say this. Early on, I was not the most popular guy in town. And the district attorney's office was really angry at rulings I was made, I was told, and it became apparent because they weren't hesitant to talk about it to reporters, and they were going to run me out of town.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I was going to ask you. When you knew when you were going to kick the death penalty case, dismiss that, you knew you were going to be heavily criticized by the DA.
That was no secret, and I was not exposing myself to the media. You know, I was being very careful not to read articles about it, but somehow it was no secret. Yes, I did know that. I knew that.
And yet you went ahead and did it anyway.
I didn't think it was a close call, and I still don't think it was a close call. At the time, again, I was too stupid to think about it, I guess. But it was so apparent. And the district attorney's office, and these were good lawyers. I mean, I didn't know them all. They weren't my friends, but I knew them professionally, and they had great reputations, and they were vigorously prosecuting it. And they were saying in open court, you know, Judge, what are you doing? How can you possibly? And they were denying that there was any misconduct. They did that for years, a couple years. And it was so obvious. I couldn't figure out what evidence they were listening to that I had missed. I just didn't think I had any choice. I struggled with it. And it took me, when I first read Scott Sanders' motion, it was 506 pages. I walked into my office one day, I think it was at the end of 2012 or early 2013. I had gone for a run at noon. It was a Friday. I remember looking out at the mountains. It was one of those picture-perfect Orange County days. From my 11th floor chambers, on a clear day, I could look across the LA basin to Mount Baldy. You've had these days. You look out and the mountains are snow-capped. The sky is blue. It was one of those days, and it was just a beautiful view. And I walk in, and there's this rolling cart in my chambers. And I had two great clerks who worked with me. And I said, Brenda, what's going on? Brenda worked with you before you, I met Brenda when she was working for you. And she's still working over there. She's still terrific. And I said, Brenda, one of your colleagues forgot something. Because it was one of these rolling carts that the clerks in those days when we had paper files used to deliver.
Well, that was the motion.
And she said, she comes in with a big smile. She says, no, Judge, that's yours. And I said, Brenda, what is this? And she said, Mr. Sanders just filed a motion on decry. And it'd been in my court for about a year at this point, but it was just percolating along kind of below the horizon or the waterline. And I said, well, what is all this? And she said that first binder, and it was a big black 3-ring binder, 3 or 4 inches thick. She says, that's the motion, and all the rest of this is exhibits. And there were like 40 other binders full of exhibits. It turned out the motion was 506 pages. There were about 40 binders at that point of exhibits, so there were something like 20,000 pages of exhibits. Some of them had been filed under seal, but not all of them. And I sat down and began to read. And when I started reading the motion, it was not the most well-edited motion in the history of motions. But there was a lot of stuff in the motion that got my attention. But I was in complete denial. I read it, and Mr. Sanders was making really serious allegations that there was misconduct in this case by the sheriff and the district attorney, and not only in this case, but that it had been going on for years. And I had been a judge and a prosecutor and a defense attorney handling murder cases by that point for 25 years or something. Never had heard a word about it. And I mean, it was well read, and there was a lot of attachments on other cases and stuff, but I just couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it. But he convinced me that we had to have a hearing, and I thought the hearing would last for a few days. He'd call some witnesses, and nothing would come of it, and we'd move on. Well, we started the hearing on March 18th. I want to say it was maybe a year later, because there was a lot of interim motion work about whether we'd have a hearing. So it was about a year later. And I thought we'd go.
And he was asking you to kick to dismiss the death penalty.
He was asking me for a lot of relief, and he wasn't even sure, I don't think. If he were here today, I don't know what he'd say, but I, in my heart of hearts, I think he wasn't exactly sure what he had or what he was going to ask for in terms of relief. But he thought, as a sanction for the misconduct, one of the possibilities was I would remove the death penalty. And
so what I find interesting, though, is the courage that it took to do this. You knew you were going to get hammered by the DA. The publicity was bad, and a judge can't respond. You can't defend yourself. You can't explain distortions and misperceptions that others would mention about you.
that's part of the job, Justice Aronson.
Yeah.
And it is a challenge sometimes, and that's all true. Right.
It must have been gratifying to get the support you got from the legal community.
Well, initially, I was not the good guy in this case from any source. The media covered this case heavily. Every time, initially, for the first year or two or three, every time the case was on calendar, and I had since moved into the largest courtroom in the building, and we had 112, I think it was, spectator seats, theater spectator seats. When that case first came to court, for the first couple of years, every single seat was full because all of the victims' family members and friends came en masse. I mean, this case was a big deal, and it should have been. It was a terrible case. Every case was full. Every seat was full. The victims' family members and friends had shirts with their loved ones' pictures. They wore buttons with their loved ones' pictures. We did not have an empty, and there was standing room only, and they were there every day. They felt, and I completely understood, that they owed it to the people they had lost to be there. And when I announced we were going to have a hearing, just have a hearing, which I thought would be very perfunctory, whoa, I did not get a good visceral reaction from the audience. I mean, they groaned, and I always let them speak, and they got up, and they told me what they thought. I mean, the lawyers were arguing, but I had a lot of victim impact stuff. I thought this was a special case, and I extended the victim impact rules a little bit to allow them to get up and speak. And they were not shy in telling me that they didn't think I knew what I was doing or I had any business. And I did respond a little bit on the record in open court to try to explain to them the process. But I didn't beat the drum. I just wanted them to know that I was hearing them. But there was a legal reason that I felt I had to do what we were going to do. So anyway, we end up on March 18th. I'm not sure of the year. I know it was March 18th, but I think it was 2013. So now his crimes were on October 12th, 2011. We're already a couple of years out. And we weren't making any progress. We were stuck in the mud, and they just couldn't understand why. So anyway, we start the hearing. And the very first witness, I'm not going to go into this because this hearing went on for months and involved dozens of witnesses and thousands of pages, but the very first witness was the primary, and Scott Sanders, it was his hearing, and he had the burden of convincing me that something was going on, but he had made a prima facie showing that I thought the law required me to give him a chance. And I didn't think he was going to be able to show anything. I really didn't, because the stuff he was claiming, who's going to admit this? He calls as his first witness the primary informant. Inmate F, his name was, but he quickly was identified. He wasn't identified in any of the papers because he was a confidential informant.
Well, a lot of people won't know the legal background of this, so...
I just hate to go into it too much, but the allegations were, just in a nutshell, that that Mr. DeCry had been formally charged and he had counsel, which was true. And that thereafter, in an effort to generate a jailhouse confession, the sheriff and the district attorney orchestrated an effort to put an informant in direct contact with him who was really an agent of law enforcement, and that he would get Mr. DeCry to confess. The truth that was not disputed was inmate F was placed in a cell next to Mr. DeCry, and the people agreed, because they wanted to use the confession, that Mr. DeCry did in fact confess to inmate F, whose real name was Fernando Perez, and this is all public record now. But he was a confidential informant. The question was, had this been done in violation of the Sixth Amendment. And there is a famous case from the United States Supreme Court called United States versus Messiah that says after somebody has been charged and has counsel, you can't do that. It's illegal.
Violates the right to counsel.
Yes, and so it wasn't disputed that Mr. DeCry lived in a cell next to inmate F and confessed to him. What was disputed was whether or not he was an agent. And the people were adamant that he was not. But Mr. Sanders claimed he was going to be able to prove that he was, and I thought he had a right to try to prove that. Well, and I thought he had no shot, because I mean, what's the chances?
But he did.
Inmate F comes in as the very first witness, and basically he admits most of it. He said he had been charged with a life offense. He had been convicted at a jury trial. He was facing a life sentence, and he was approached, and he became an informant. And he didn't admit every aspect of the Messiah violation, but it got my attention pretty quickly. He testified for a couple of days. Scott Sanders was ready, and the people weren't ready. And when their turn came to examine Mr. Perez, they didn't do a very good job. And they were good lawyers. I don't know if they were surprised by what he said or what. And then the second witness, after Mr. Perez's several days on the witness stand were finished, and I'm taking copious notes, and I'm listening with my poker face, but I'm thinking, holy smoke, I didn't expect that. The second witness that Mr. Sanders wants to call is the lead prosecutor, because his state of mind and his knowledge are relevant. And when he was called, it was as if the DA's office had no thought that this might happen, and they almost died. And they said, you can't call the lead prosecutor. Well, as it turned out, and when I was a prosecutor, a homicide prosecutor, I was called as a witness a couple of times. Once, it was on a capital case, and the defense wanted to call me about some decisions I had made, and nobody even thought to object. I remember testifying, and I answered the questions, and the issue was resolved, and the case moved forward. But they didn't seem to think that that was even something that could even possibly happen, but I listened to both sides argue. I said, is there some privilege or some reason why he wouldn't have to testify if he has relevant knowledge? Maybe he doesn't, but the defense claims he does. And they couldn't identify any privilege or any legal reason why he wouldn't have to testify. So I said, get up here. So he testified, and his testimony, I thought, ultimately was painfully honest. And he had to make some admissions in front of a courtroom full of people. And he's the lead prosecutor on this major case. And he's the head of the DA's homicide unit, a job I'd had 20 years before that. And he made some admissions about mistakes that he had made in hindsight. And once that happened, and those two witnesses had testified, we're about a week into the hearing, we were off to the races. And I knew that this was going to be interesting, and it was.
Now, you said that the DeCry case was the reason that you got appointed to the appellate bench. Now, why do you say that?
I was told by some reliable sources just this, that Jerry Brown, the governor, who was a lawyer, he had been the attorney general, he was following the case. And I have never, I don't think, met Governor Brown. I'm pretty sure I never have. But he has an interesting background. He went into the Jesuits. He went to St. Ignatius High School. And the case this case, it sounds funny to say, but it was on the front page of the LA Times and the Orange County Register and the Daily Journal when we were in hearings almost every day. And my picture was in the paper all the time and stuff. I mean, it was a big deal. It was embarrassing. And there wasn't anything I could do about it. I didn't let cameras into the courtroom, but I certainly let the media come in and cover it. And I let them take pictures occasionally. I was concerned that the witnesses were going to respond to TV cameras and stuff. And I know that that's a controversial topic, and I'm not sure I was right, but I did have concern about that. But it was heavily covered by the media. Daily, every day. I got sick of seeing myself in the newspaper. And so it was credible that the governor was aware of it.
and admired your courage and
Well,
the
I heard
decision
that.
you made.
I did hear that. I did. I mean, I'm not going to tell you some other things I heard because I don't know if they were true, but they were very nice.
I would offer, though, a dissent, Justice Goethals. You would have gotten to the appellate court regardless of the Decry case. You were too accomplished, too respected in the legal community. You were a perfect candidate for the court. And so I like to think that you would have joined the appellate court regardless of Decry.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. And your career in Superior Court, though, was not just about the Decry case. You had a lot of other notable cases as well.
I did. I tried other death penalty cases, and I tried the kind of cases that those few judges who were lucky enough to have long cause assignments tried. I tried a lot of cases that were really interesting, challenging, good lawyers, serious charges.
Eventually, though, you did apply to the appellate court. What prompted that?
Part of it, honestly, was probably my age. I loved being a Superior Court judge. I loved trying cases. I loved talking to jurors. But the last couple years, I didn't love picking juries, honestly. It got to be kind of tedious. And I was moving towards my mid-60s. I think when I applied, I was 64 or 65. So, I only had 15 years on, and I'm a tier 2 judge, so I couldn't really retire with full benefits till I was 70. But I thought, I don't want to retire. I'm not ready to retire, but I'm getting a little tired of trying cases. And I knew a lot of justices here. I knew you. I knew Justice O'Leary. I knew Justice Bedsworth. I knew some of the other justices not as well. And frankly, some of you were kind of saying, why don't you think about it? And I didn't think I was of the caliber. I thought I was good as a trial judge. I wasn't so sure how good I would be as a justice. But age and hearing those comments, it was kind of a combination. And Bill Rylersdam, who retired, he called me very graciously, and I wasn't a friend of his. I mean, I didn't know Bill, Justice Rylersdam. He called me and he said, "Are you going to apply for my seat?" And I said, "What are you thinking about? I don't think so." And he said, "I think you should." And he and I got to know each other after that a little bit, and that added a little weight to the decision.
Very natural break there. And I worked out.
Are we at 2 hours now?
You are at 2 hours.
We can't go more than one more break.
So, Rory, you don't have to go home at 5, do you?
I guess just by Friday, really is the car. I don't think my wife would be bothered if I don't make it home, but I'd like to get home eventually.
Bingo.
Okay, I think we're half an hour away, I think.
We got it. Yeah. We got it. When you come in again, when we see you, we are going to come in about 5 minutes early because we're going to end before we do it again, and I might need a couple minutes at the end just to wrap it up.
Okay, so this is about a half hour thing, so I'll set myself a reminder at about like 22, 23.
Okay.
So if you see me,
Yeah.
you know you've got 5 to 7 minutes
Okay.
left in that.
And if nothing else, I'm going to say we got to, or you say we got to stop.
I think we've gone this far. I think we got to cover everything. And I would just recommend coming back at the normal time. But he's not going to be done in 20 minutes. We're towards the end, but we have a lot to cover. I was going to ask about your activity in the legal community. I mean, you're on the board of directors for the Bar Association. You're adjunct professor at Loyola.
I do want to mention that I taught.
Yeah, and we've talked about the prompting. So we're in the appellate court right now. I mean, we can kind of circle back to being active in the legal community, your obligations as a lawyer and as a judge. Maybe you can talk about that.
So how long have you been on the appellate bench?
This is my 8th year.
Do we have to go month by month?
Day by day?
We're not going month by month.
We're going day by day?
You got the hourly diary app?
You know what? It has seemed kind of natural, though. I mean, I'm a gabber, but we haven't had any awkward moments.
No, I don't think so.
We've just been gabbing.
It's conversational.
It's just conversational.
Yeah.
No, I don't know how much they added, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't get too invested in all of this making the final cut.
Hey, is there a way you could, for my grandkids, I could get a rough cut of this? Can you send it to me?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, not a rough cut, just the thing.
Files.
Yeah, and I may not ever look at it, but, it is kind of nice. When I was looking at yours the other day, I thought, it's nice for your family to have that. I think it's neat. Because you said stuff on that I'm sure you've never said. They never heard you say, so I was thinking the same thing. So anyway.
Probably did, yeah.
And they didn't edit yours at all. Zero.
Oh, do they edit these things?
I don't know.
I assume. Well, I mean, I'm giving them it'll be 5 files for sure at the end of this. So they're going to have to find somewhere to join them together.
Yeah.
And at least like those transitions, like take a break.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to come off as a break.
Right,
They're going
right.
to find some way to cut it
Yeah.
and then put it together. So there'll be some editing, I'm sure.
Okay.
And they may say it's just too damn long, and they may, they may just arbitrarily chop it in half. I wouldn't be surprised.
There's storage issues.
Exactly.
There's only so much room in the cloud left.
Exactly. The cloud isn't endless. Where were we? I forget.
Okay, well, you just finished telling us why you applied to the Court of
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so we're ready to go. Okay, so you applied to the Court of Appeal and were appointed. Did that come as a shock to you, or had you expected it? I'm sure you had to have expected it.
The way things went, I wasn't shocked, honestly. And decry had happened. I knew I was kind of a high-profile person at that point, and some other really good people applied. And I wasn't shocked, honestly. And I was the oldest.
Yeah. So you make your way up here. How is the adjustment from going from the trial court to the appellate court?
It's different. This is a much different job. I think I asked you that question, and my reaction is very similar to yours. One of the luxuries is we have more time to think about serious issues. When you're a trial judge, you gotta respond, and maybe you take a break and go back and do some research, or even talk to one of your colleagues occasionally if it's really an unusual issue that you haven't seen before. But you got to make a decision. You got to keep the train on the tracks, and especially if there's a jury in the box, you want to keep moving. So you always do your best, but once in a while you might miss one. Here, we are really lucky because we do have the luxury of more time. Not as much time maybe as the trial judges think we have, because we have a volume here. I say to my staff all the time, whether you're here or not, the candy keeps coming down the conveyor belt, an allusion to the famous I Love Lucy episode. The candy's always coming down the conveyor belt, and sometimes it's coming faster, sometimes it's coming slower, but it never stops. So you got to stay on top of it. I think what you realize, when I got here, I said earlier, I designated you my mentor, and you gave me some really good advice. And one of the pieces of advice you gave me was, be selfish, get the best staff you can get. And I was really lucky. I was incredibly lucky, and you played a role in that, as you know. 2 of my lawyers, we all have 3 staff lawyers, and we all have a judicial assistant who is the brains and heart and soul of any operation. KO saved, we had a new JA had just arrived named Kim Rodriguez, and she had worked for a big firm for a long time and is really smart. I've told her in another era she would have gone to law school and she would have been the justice, but she didn't. And she is basically an assistant who's very analogous to a paralegal. She's terrific. She edits my opinions, and I ask her for her opinion all the time and stuff. She's terrific. Then we have 3 lawyers who work in each of our chambers. And you said to me, be selfish. Get the best staff you can. And so I had a few months to figure out who my staff was going to be. And I don't exactly remember how or why this happened, because you weren't ready to retire yet. But first, a guy who I had met when you were here, when I would come over and visit you occasionally, named John Seckinger, who had worked for you for years. His dad has been a professor of law for 50 years at Notre Dame Law School, and I've met him. He's a great guy. You made me take John, even though you weren't ready to retire. But so John Seckinger becomes my first staff member. Then another younger woman named Kim Chase worked for you, and she was relatively new to the court. She had been a partner at a big law firm. And I didn't know Kim that well, but you came to me and said, you got to take Kim Chase. I am going to retire. Now it's a little bit later and you're getting closer to retirement. You said, you got to take Kim Chase. Didn't know her that well, got to know her. She moved. So you're still here, and I've stolen two of your lawyers, John Seckinger and Kim Chase. Third, a lawyer who had been on the staff of presiding Justice Dave Sills when he was here. He has since passed away, God rest his soul. Then she was on the staff of my predecessor, Justice Reilersdam, who has also passed away, God rest his soul. So she had gone back to central staff, Kelly McCourt, and I got to know Kelly, and I grabbed Kelly. So my staff was Kim Chase, John Seckinger, and Kelly Chase, Kelly McCourt, excuse me. And they were just fantastic. They had been here, they were smart, they were experienced. They did not have a lot of criminal experience. They were all civil lawyers, but God bless them. They are fantastic. And
well, I knew that that Kim and John would be a good fit for you. I was going to retire, and I wanted them to land in a good spot. And I was right, because I know that they were delighted to work for you and enjoyed it enormously.
But that's part of the difference. You don't have immediate assistants like that in the Superior Court. There are some lawyers who work over there, but as a criminal trial judge, we didn't have much access to them. You kind of relied on yourself. Here, if you don't know how the sausage is made in the Court of Appeal, without a great staff, you're not going to make much sausage, frankly, because there's too much to do.
There are too many cases.
Too many cases. And you told me that. I didn't appreciate it. It's a process. And I remember when I got here, you also told me, I've been a trial lawyer for 25 years. I'd been a Superior Court judge for 15 years. I couldn't imagine there was much to learn. And you said, well, for the first 6, 12, 18 months, there's a pretty sharp learning curve. And I found that to be true. You have to develop your voice, kind of a style. You have to figure out how just to process cases. I got here and I had this vision. There's a justice up in Los Angeles County who sits in Ventura County. He's the presiding judge of the division in Ventura County named Art Gilbert. And I've met Art a few times. I don't know him well, but he's still sitting out there. And he writes a column in the Daily Journal. And I have no idea why I read this column or kept it, but I wrote it down. In September of 2016, Justice Gilbert wrote a column about the process of writing opinions. And this is 2016. I'm not, I didn't get here for a couple of years, so I don't think I was thinking about coming over here, but I always wondered why the opinions were so long when I would get them back on my cases in the Superior Court. And he wrote a column, and the headline was shorter, better, clearer, stronger. And I kept that. I don't know why I kept it, but I kept it. And I still have it up on my desk in my in-basket, and I read it occasionally. And when I got here, I was sure I was going to write shorter, better, clearer, stronger opinions. And that was my goal. It's still my goal. But I now understand why that's a hard thing to do. We have certain obligations as justi, and we have to respond to arguments made by the parties and explain our thinking as to those arguments. And it's just not easy to write a 5-page opinion anymore, or a 6 or 8 or even 10-page opinions. The cases are complicated, and it takes us a while to go through them and talk about the facts and explain why we reach the conclusions that we reach.
Yeah, what's that old saying that I didn't have time to make it shorter?
If I'd had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Yeah.
There's a controversy. People think Mark Twain said that, but I'm not sure that he did.
So tell me, in terms of adjustment, which you're still undergoing in your first couple of years, what was it like, on the trial court? You just make up your mind and then you don't have to convince anyone else. What was it like to work with your colleagues?
You got to get to know them. And I knew you, I knew Justice O'Leary, I knew Justice Bedsworth. I knew Justice Thompson a little bit. I knew Justice Icola a little bit. I knew Justice Moore a little bit. I missed somebody.
Kale.
Or Justice, if I didn't say her, I had known Justice O'Leary very well.
And Justice Moore.
Yeah. So I knew about half of you personally. I knew the other half professionally. You got to get to know them and understand where they're coming from and where their sympathies lie. And we all have biases. I don't use that in a negative way at all, but we all have certain thoughts and preferences. And so you get to know them. Justice O'Leary told me when I got here, you got to learn how to count to two, because our panels are all three justices, and whichever two agree, that's the way the opinion's going to go. In this court, it has been my experience that we almost always do agree. The vast majority of our cases are 3-0 unanimous opinions. In 7+ years here, I'm in my 8th year, I was thinking about it. I have written, honestly, about a dozen dissents in 7 or 8 years. So we don't disagree very often. You and I disagree, when you were here, we disagreed maybe 2 or 3 times. Famously, one of those times you wrote the dissent and the Supreme Court took the case and agreed with you. And I've never seen you happier than the day that opinion came out, in which they reversed me and they adopted your dissent. But it doesn't happen very often.
In fairness, that was a very close issue, unsettled.
It was an unsettled issue.
Good arguments either way.
Here, my experience has been, you're not here if you're not smart. I am not the smartest justice here, but everybody here is smart. And everybody here works hard, and it has been my experience everybody here wants to reach the right decision. And so it's easy to work with people like that, even when you occasionally disagree with them. It's easy to work with them because everybody's heart is in the right place and we're all trying to get to the same place, which is the right decision.
What would you say are some of the important qualities that go into making a good appellate justice?
I'd say, number one, you got to be smart. You got to be willing to work hard, try to find the right result. You got to be open-minded. You got to be collegial. Got to have some diplomatic skills to talk to your colleagues when you disagree with them in a way that is not offensive. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind.
Another one that, at least dealing with you, is that you're so open-minded, willing to listen to dissenting views and to consider them earnestly.
I think that's important. I think that's part of being collegial or diplomatic, open-minded. We're not always going to be right, and sometimes your initial view isn't right. I've changed my mind plenty of times. Politicians say that's flip-flopping. You change your minds. I don't consider that flip-flopping at all. I consider that being open-minded. Abraham Lincoln, who was one of my idols, I'm a big Lincoln guy, changed his mind all the time. And he said he changed his mind because he got more information and he wasn't sure he was right the first time, and he reconsidered and went in a different direction based on new information. I think that that's an admirable quality, not something to be, belittled.
What about notable cases you had in your 8-year career on the appellate bench? Do any come to mind?
The cases that come to mind the most as I reflect now, I'm going to retire. Today is February 19th, 2025. I'm going to retire on April 1st, so I'm 6 weeks out. So I have been reflecting a little bit on some of the cases. And the cases that I think, to me personally, are the most important are cases that deal with professionalism and ethics, those kinds of cases. I've participated in a number of cases as a panelist, but I've also written and published a couple of cases on that topic. I am very sensitive to lawyers acting as professionals. I don't shoot the messenger. Sometimes I understand lawyers have to make arguments that maybe they don't even really strongly believe in, but they're obligated ethically to make on behalf of their client. I don't shoot the messenger under those circumstances. In fact, I admire that. I had to do that sometimes myself. But I don't like it when lawyers don't act ethically or professionally. And again, I try not to shoot the messenger, but I make my position pretty clear on that, and I've written some opinions on that subject that I think make my position clear. I also, I expect lawyers, I believe in civility. I think the profession is better when lawyers are vigorous advocates and they fight hard professionally, but they don't make the arguments personal. And when the case is over, they let it go and they move on to the next case and accept the fact that the opponent is a human being who was acting professionally also. So I admire that, and I try to underscore that.
Yeah, I know you feel strongly about that. I know that you're concerned about the coarseness of our civil discourse, and so it's even more important that we maintain that civility in court.
I really strongly believe in that. I think that the legal profession is just part of the whole society, and clearly, as we sit here, society in general and politics have become far more polar. We mentioned earlier, we were on opposite sides of a serious criminal case. You were representing somebody charged with murder who I was prosecuting. I'm not sure today we would have become the friends that we have become, just because we wouldn't have given ourselves an opportunity to get to know each other as we did and see how much we had in common. And I think that's a shame. I learned that from my dad. My dad was a deputy public defender, and he had lots of friends in the district attorney's office back in his day. He had a lot of friends from the public defender's office too, but growing up, when they would come over to our house and play poker and drink too much, there were a lot of deputy DAs there. There were a lot of deputy public defenders there. Occasionally there were some cops there, you know. I mean, it wasn't a situation that because you were on one side or the other, you were a good person or a bad person. You were part of a valued profession, and you were all responsible for maintaining and fostering the integrity of that profession.
So let me switch gears here a little bit and ask you, because we were talking about being a professional, the commitment to the legal community, and I know you've been active in the legal community. Why don't you kind of describe some of the things that you've done?
Well, I wasn't as active in the Bar Association as some people have been, some other judges I know have been, but the Orange County Bar Association many years ago, 30 years ago, established a committee called the Ethics and Professionalism Committee. I was one of the founding members of that. I was involved in that for a long time. We started out writing advisory ethical opinions for the members of the Bar Association. That died after a while, but I wrote a couple of the initial ones. I can't remember what the topics were, but I was involved in that. Later on, I was elected to be a member of the Board of Directors, or I think it was still called the Board of Directors then, of the Bar Association. So for 3 years, once a month, I went to those meetings and suffered through those meetings with various presidents. My siblings, my mom was a teacher. Before she had so many children, she had a teaching credential, was an elementary school teacher. When my dad was in law school, that's how
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
In fact, that's another thing we have in common.
Indeed.
My mother was a teacher.
I know that. And she was an elementary school teacher when my dad was in law school, continued to teach until kids started coming along. And that meant a lot. That was really part of our upbringing. So of my 7 siblings, 5 or 6 of them were and are teachers. And that got under my skin as well. So I taught as an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School for 20 years. I loved that. I would still be doing it, but I drove up there from Orange County to downtown LA on Thursday night, every Thursday night for a 6 to 9 o'clock class for 20 years. And, you know, I just got too old to do that. I stopped a couple of years ago. I also taught for 10 years at Whittier Law School, which its campus was in Orange County, so that was much easier. That was a few miles from my house. So for several years, I was teaching at both Whittier and Loyola the same time. I taught hundreds of law students who are now lawyers, some of whom come back and see me. Just recently, one of my lawyers argued in front of us, and I didn't recognize his name on the briefs. Obviously, I don't recuse myself from all of my students. I've had this happen more than once. And they're not friends or anything, and I feel no reservation about being fair to them. But this guy shows up for argument really just within the last couple months, and I recognized him, and he stood up and said his name, and I remembered him, and I said, "Do I know you?" And he kind of giggled and he said, yeah, you taught me 10 years ago or 15 years ago at Loyola Law School.
What'd you teach?
I taught evidence a couple of times, which was a challenge. I know you taught evidence at some point. That's a tough class to teach. That's a really challenging class. But mostly what I taught was trial advocacy, both civil and criminal trial advocacy. And it was very gratifying. I loved doing it. I think they liked me. They didn't want me to quit when I quit, although maybe they were just saying that to be nice. But 20 years of that at Loyola and 10 years at Whittier was one of the really gratifying things that I've done as a lawyer. And I also taught, for about 10 years, I taught seizure classes, which that's the California Judicial Education and Research Center. I taught the new judges class to brand new judges, most of who didn't have any criminal background.
Yeah, the orientation.
The orientation classes. I taught new judges how to be a judge in criminal law. And I did that until I got here. And then they don't ask appellate justices to do that so much. They want, I probably would have continued to do it, but when they found out I got elevated, they weren't really that interested anymore, so I stopped.
So now, you've been on the appellate court for 8 years. Why are you retiring now?
I'm 72. It's time for me to retire. I've been, you're fully vested in this when you're 70 and you've done 20 years, and I'm 72 and I've done 23. I'm not tired of it. I like it. I don't think I've lost my edge, but I think there is a time. My 3 children are all happily married to great people. Matt's married to Rebecca. Sarah's married to Scott. Pat is married to Megan. I have 7 great grandchildren. Lincoln, Delaney, Millie, Jack, Georgia, Goldie, and Thomas, all of whom live in Orange County, not too far away from us. We see them all the time. We love them. We enjoy them. They're all getting older. We can do stuff with them. I want to have that opportunity. Everybody says they're leaving to do stuff with their family, but I do, I really do. And they enjoy being with us at this point. I'm still able to do stuff with them. But also, I'm 72. I've had a great run and a great opportunity. I never dreamed. I started law school 50 years ago last summer. So I've been working in the law for over 50 years. I've been a lawyer for 47 years or 48 years. I've been on the bench for 22 plus years. I've had a great run, and I think it behooves me to give another smart, qualified person a chance to do this job, get a fresh point of view, and I look forward to that.
You mentioned your children. I know you're proud of them. Tell us a little bit about them.
I really tried not to direct my kids. They've all been great kids. We've had our ups and downs with them like all parents do. They all have their moments. But they've been great kids. Matt, when he graduated from college, wanted to work in the TV business, and he did for 10 years. Never mentioned being a lawyer. I never mentioned him being a lawyer. He had no interest in being a lawyer. He worked in the TV business for 10 or 12 years behind the scenes, behind the camera. He then met a great gal, and he decided that the TV business had run its course, and he ended up going to law school, much to my surprise. He is now he's 44 years old, but he's a relatively new lawyer, partner in a little law firm down in Laguna Beach, does lemon law. We couldn't be prouder of him and Rebecca and their kids. Sarah went in high school. It actually was a little kid with her dolls. Sarah was always playing with the doll's hair. And in high school, she was always doing her girlfriend's hair. And she said she wanted to be a hairdresser. We said, Sarah, that's fantastic. Are you sure? She said, yeah. I said, Sarah, this is great. It'd be fantastic. But I'd like you to get a college education. And if you go to college and you still want to do this, we will support you 100%. She reluctantly agreed. She went to college, got a communications major, went to Europe for a semester, had a great time. And she got out the day she graduated. She said, okay, I'm ready to go to hair school. She went to hair school, did that for a year. She now has her own hair salon and is the mother of 3. Is married to Scott, who's a CPA. Rebecca, by the way, Matt's wife, has a master's, is really smart. She's a paralegal, she's a photographer on the side. Scott's a CPA, doing great. So Sarah's doing great. Pat my youngest son, was like my brother Rick. Not because I pushed him, but he always wanted to be a lawyer, I think. He always had this vision. I didn't discourage him, but I didn't encourage him. He is a lawyer. He has been a lawyer now for 10 or 12 years. He's a partner at a medical malpractice defense firm in Long Beach. He's married to Megan, who is also a hairdresser, one of Sarah's dear friends. They have 2 kids. They're all doing great. They all live in Orange County. We see them all the time. I couldn't have more love or appreciation for all of them than I have, and I love every minute we spend with them.
So we've talked about your professional career, solely about your professional career, but what about your personal interests and activities as you look back? We did mention that we were able to get to know each other running at noon, and you were very involved in that. What were some of your interests? And Baker to Vegas is
right.
one of the things.
Running became, after I hurt my knee and I decided to go off, kind of based on a doctor's suggestion that I strengthen my legs, running became a huge part of my life. And I made many of my dearest friends and had many of my greatest experiences running. When my wife and I have traveled a little bit, and we've gone to other cities or other countries, I have run around, I've run along the Seine in Paris, and I've run along the Thames in London. I've run along the Potomac in Washington, D.C. Wherever we've been, I have gone off and run, and I met a lot of my dearest friends running. You develop a bond when you're a runner, and with you and Jim Smith and Dave Carter and a lot of other people, I've gotten to know you. You let down the walls a little bit, and we have what we used to call the runner's privilege. You could talk about anything when you're pounding along out there, and we did. And it was great. Unfortunately, it took a little toll on me, and I've had to stop running a couple of years ago. I have 2 new hips, and I have a new knee, and my other knee isn't great. And some of it on the one knee is because of my old injuries, but, running does take a toll on you. But it was great, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it. I still try to exercise every day, doing things that are less impact, less loaded, but anyway. I like to read, I like to write. I talked to you about the Decry book case a little bit. I'm writing a book about Decry, and I'm just about done with it. So I'm looking for a publisher at some point. Maybe some of you who are watching this will have read that book by the time you see it. Maybe that'll cause you to watch this. But anyway, so I'm writing a book. I do like to write. I'm not a great writer, but that's a big part of this job, so I take pride in my writing a little bit. I'm very interested in politics. I'm not going to talk about politics on this, and I haven't been actively involved in politics, but I follow it. I'm interested in history. I was a history major in college. I still read a lot of history. I like history. I find it entertaining, as boring as my kids find it. I find it very entertaining. Family and friends. I like to go out to dinner with you and watch you eat salmon and drink Pinot Grigio.
So we've talked about influential people. You mentioned one of your heroes was Lincoln. We've talked about Jim Smith and Dave Carter.
And you.
Yeah, but we'll pass over that quickly. There's someone I think that we want to mention. 3 minutes left. Okay. Well, this will take more than 3 minutes. So can we break it here?
All right.
We're going to shift to, the question is going to be about Patty.
Yes, we should talk about my beautiful wife.
So what we have
what do we got left?
What we have left is influential people talk about how Patty's support and understanding helped you through the years. 50th anniversary next year.
Indeed.
How your career impacted your family and how your family impacted your life, which might be all kind of one question.
Yeah.
We've already covered your children. Let's see. Looking back was a decision to become a judge rewarding. What it has meant to you. We've covered the qualities of a good judge already.
Sounds like 15 minutes, Roy.
Yeah. And what's next? What's next? So that's what you're looking forward to, and you can.
This is all going to end up on the cutting room floor.
Pee one more time.
Yeah, so am I think. You get old, Roy, when you sit there for a long time.
I am actually familiar.
You're young. How many years you been here? 15?
25.
25?
25.
Oh my God.
25 November of last year.
Good gracious. So you were 12 when you started.
Yeah.
So that means you got another few years to go.
I was 30. I got a late start with the course.
So when can you guys retire?
So I'm going to go for 32. I'll retire at 62.
All right. All right.
Pretty.
This building didn't fall down when he left. It certainly won't fall down when I leave. But when you leave, this building may fall down.
We did a pretty good job putting it together. It has held up remarkably well. We had enough forethought and foresight to wire it, and it was prepared.
Well, they were lucky to have people like you here that had the foresight to say, hey, we might cost a little more, but we have to do this because in the long run, it's going to save us.
We had a good time doing it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Indeed. Indeed.
One of the movies nominated for an Academy Award as Best Picture this year is a 3-hour movie. So it's got an intermission.
Right.
We're
Brutalist? Is that the one?
Brutalist, yeah. We're running up on that. We might tell the people at the outset now, sell popcorn and there should be an intermission here. And he's got a lot to talk about, so.
Well, it's a lengthy career. I imagine there's quite a bit to talk about.
Live that long, there's a lot but there are a lot of really a lot of forks in the road and a lot of milestone events.
Yeah, I mean, just personal history and then the evolution of the job, the evolution of the law over that time.
Yeah.
I think it's really kind of the point of this legacy project, right? Is to provide that perspective. And
Yeah, that's what we're gonna close on here.
there got to be hundreds of them by now. They have all the districts.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much everybody's.
Some historians,
I usually could.
I couldn't imagine going through all that stuff. Anybody would. You know, it's just for family and friends, I think. I can't imagine. It might be, yeah, a legal historian might be interested in it because a lot of those people, when they started this, are dead.
Right.
And as time goes on, that's gonna, yeah.
Continue to happen.
So I don't know, other than a legal historian, I don't know really why anybody would be interested other than family, friends, grandkids. But when you first get out, if he's gonna go work for ADR. So if you're a lawyer, you're really doing a thorough investigation. You're trying to decide what arbitrator or mediator you're gonna go to. And there's this video, 2.5-hour video of him talking about his life. You get a pretty good idea of whether you're going to get along with that guy or not.
Yeah. That's fairly true. Well, now when you did yours, was there like kind of a theme to it, or was it the same storytelling? Like here's how he started.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's just chronological autobiography, really. So,
I got a lot of boring stuff to
but
talk about.
I found it, Tom's much better at this. I found it very awkward to talk about myself for a couple hours. It's just.
And I just love to talk about
something
myself. Yeah, I just love it. There's nothing I'd rather do.
I don't know whether you love it or not, but you're
the
better at it. It's just I'm not something that you're used to doing or I'm very adept at.
Yeah, it's awkward. How
It's
about
awkward
that? It is
to
awkward.
talk about. It sounds like you're just kind of patting yourself on the back, and
Continuously, yeah.
yeah, and
And that's not our style. It is not. Despite what you may think, that really is not our style.
Yeah. It's awkward. It's not.
We're here not because of ourselves, but because of some dumb luck.
Yeah.
along the
Now,
way.
Dave Carter, this would be like a
God.
duck to walk.
You would have to stay until Friday. Oh, my God. Indeed. No, this, honest to Pete, I guarantee you, this is it.
Is it?
This is it.
Yeah.
You're not buying it. I can tell. He's a little skeptical.
Did you, before we begin, did you want to mention any other influential people, heroes in history or anything like that?
No, I got Lincoln in, and I might just, I might again just remind myself that my greatest influences were probably my parents, for better or worse.
Okay, so
We talked about them at the outset.
So you want me
full
to,
circle.
do you want to mention your parents again?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't I do this? We've mentioned some influential people let's talk about the most influential
Yeah,
people in your
let's
life.
do that.
There
That's
you
what
go.
we'll
Okay.
come back to. Got it.
All right, so Tom, we've talked about some mentors, some influential people in your life, some heroes that you followed. You mentioned, as I said earlier, you mentioned Lincoln and Dave Carter and Jim Smith. What about the most influential people in your life? I know who you're going to say and talk about. So let's go ahead and tell me who those people are.
I want to come full circle. I started talking about my family and my parents, and I think without a doubt that my parents were the most influential, have been the most influential people. My mom was a saint. At her funeral, in her eulogy, I said my mom was a saint. She raised 8 kids. Even though my dad was a lawyer, with 8 kids and as a public defender, I mean, there were a lot of challenges raising eight strong-minded kids. And she was married to my dad for 49 years. She died the day after their 49th anniversary. And my dad was no walk in the park. He was a tough guy who drank too much and didn't take very good care of himself, but he was also a terrific guy. So my mom was a great influence, and my dad was a great influence. I learned so many things about life from my dad, things to do from my dad, learned about the law from my dad, even though at the time I didn't appreciate how applicable they would be to my professional career. And then I also, honestly, from my dad, I learned a lot of things not to do. My dad made mistakes in his life. He was the old school lawyer. You'd be in trial, you'd go to lunch with the judge and have a couple of drinks, and then you go back and finish trial. I mean, I'm not going to amplify that story, but that was my dad. And they just were, I was very fortunate to have been born when I was and to have been raised how I was.
Speaking of influential people, tell us about how Patty's support and understanding over the years have helped you.
Well, the moment in my life, again, we've talked about these moments, the moment in my life was October 11th when my friend called me of 1968, and then the evening of October 12th, 1968, I was smart enough to recognize that this 16-year-old lovely young woman was going to be my life partner. I did not realize it that night, honestly. She claims she did, but I have been so blessed to have been married to Patty over in Goethals for the last 49 years. Our anniversary, our 49th anniversary is May 22nd of this year, and next year we're going to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary if she puts up with me for another 14 months. And she has been just an incredible person. She is smart. You know her. I don't have to tell you, but I'm telling posterity. She's smart. She's caring. She's sensitive. She's a woman in her own right with a lot of opinions. She ran her own interior decorating business for 25 or 30 years, which she did for many reasons. One, because she was interested in it, but also it gave her great flexibility as our children were being raised. She wanted to stay home and have the option to raise them, and by working for herself, she did that. In 2014, as a result of all that, she was lucky enough to be invited to go back and decorate the White House for Christmas, and I was lucky enough to be her +1. Because of her, I got to have dinner in the state dining room one night in November of 2014 and go down to the White House every day. She met Mrs. Obama. She saw President Obama, but didn't really meet him. But she met Michelle Obama and thought the world of her. And I did too at dinner. Michelle was there and I got to meet her, and it was just an incredible experience. That was a very small part of who she is. She's had cancer, 3 different types of cancer over an extended period of 20 years. She has treated successfully and with great resolve, and she's beaten it 3 times. If you saw her today, you would never suspect that she's a 3-time cancer survivor. She's down probably at Pilates right now at 72, grinding those young 24-year-old women into a pulp because she's relentless. And I mean, I just have been so fortunate. And she has never once tried to steer me in a direction I didn't want to go. She's been nothing but supportive.
So as you head into retirement, so tell us a little bit about what's next. What are you looking forward to?
Well, we talked about that a little bit. It's cliche to say, but I am looking forward to have more time with my family. You know, I have more free time. So I expect that I will have more time, although they're all busy. I don't expect them to drop everything and entertain me, but I just will have more flexibility to go to grandkids' activities. We go to their games now, and occasionally I get to pick up one of them from school or something, but I can do that. I mentioned that I have written a book, or am writing a book about Scott DeCry. I hope to finish that. I think I have a novel in me, which I am thinking about. They may never be published. I'm not Pollyanna. I know how hard that is, but I just like to do that and get it out of my system. I am doing what you did and what most of our colleagues have done. I'm sizing up my professional options. I think I'm not done. I mean, I'm not. I wanted to leave before you kicked me out, and I think I'm going to do that. So there is some interest in some of the private judging firms, the EDR firms, in me, and I am starting to sort that out, and I suspect that I will get involved in that, at least for a little while, to see how I like it and how they like me. But I think that I have some potential to do that. I would like to keep my hand in the profession a little bit, and I think that's a good transitional way to back out of this formal job and do something else.
Finally, looking back, as you sort of reflecting on your career in the law, was the decision to become a judge rewarding, and what has it meant to you?
I think, I may have said this earlier, but I started law school 50 years ago last summer, and I passed the bar in November of 1977. So I've been a practicing lawyer or judge for 47, 48 years. I never could have dreamed when I started law school. I wasn't sure I was going to make it through law school, much less pass the bar and get a job and practice. I never could have dreamed that I would have the professional ride that I've had. I couldn't have imagined. I remember meeting some judges when my dad was a lawyer, and I really thought these people were demigods. They were all white old men in those days, but they were really special people. I couldn't imagine that I would ever aspire to that. And then I remember when I became a judge or a lawyer, I met in passing a couple of the justices in this building. It wasn't in this building then, but justices. And I thought, wow, those people, it's amazing that we have those people walking among us. Then I become a judge, and I think, okay, I can do this. But I knew you and your colleagues over here, and I never really aspired to this. I didn't think that I was worthy of this kind of job, that I would acquit myself well. And it turns out, I can do this. Turns out you don't have to be that special. No, you do. But I never dreamed that I would have the opportunities to do what I've done, to write opinions on subjects that I've written opinions about. I wrote a water law opinion, a published opinion not too long ago. Water's a big thing in California. People think that the most valuable commodities in California are oil and silver and gold, but by far the most valuable commodity in California is water. So to have an opportunity to write a published opinion that set some precedent on that, the Supreme Court declined to take it, so it's the law of the state of California, and it's on an important topic. So I just feel very blessed and privileged, and I look at the past with great gratitude, and I look to the future with hope and anticipation, I guess.
Well, on behalf of the legal profession and the Orange County legal community, we were certainly lucky to have you move down to Orange County, and all your achievements and accomplishments have benefited so many people. And you were admired in the legal community. It was universally applauded when you were appointed to the bench and to the Court of Appeal, and it's been an honor to be your colleague, and I wish you and your family the best, my friend.
Justice Aronson, thank you for doing this. And I want to thank my staff. I want to thank everybody in this building and the whole Orange County legal community for being so nice and inviting and patient with me over the years. I wouldn't be who I am without all of you. Thank you.